Okay, good morning everyone. Welcome to Byju's Exam Prep IAS. This is Sham Kagodia. Now, before I start the discussion, if there is no issue with the sound, can you please let me know? Either give a comment in the section or give me a thumbs up. Either ways is okay. Done. Thanks a lot. Let's start. So, yesterday we completed the chapter on agriculture sector, correct? We discussed a lot of very important concepts in the agriculture sector. Now that is basically what concepts we have discussed. Basically, let's revise it. We have covered the idea of MSP, minimum support price, right? How MSP is decided, who will decide MSP, who will recommend MSP or FRP to Government of India, on what parameters we are deciding, what is cost of production, A2, A2 plus FL, C2, etc. Then if a legal recognition is given to MSP, what are the advantages? What are the concerns if a legal recognition is given? After that, we have discussed the concept of food security. Yesterday, in fact, we started with the food security itself. In food security, basically what do you mean by food security? Ensuring that the food grains are available to the people, these are affordable to the people, right? Sufficient quantity of production happens. That is basically food security. So under food security, we are implementing National Food Security Act, NFSA, wherein 67% of India's population, as per 2011 census, 67% of India's population has been covered, and we are providing food grains under NFSA. For example, under NFSA, we have public distribution system, PDS system. Under PDS, the state governments will identify the beneficiaries. The state government will identify the beneficiary. Central government will allocate the funds. State government will distribute the funds through not funds, food grains. Central government will allocate food grains, and the state government, through fair price shops, will distribute the food grains after identifying the beneficiaries. And that is basically public distribution system. Then we discussed how food subsidy is calculated, how food subsidy is changing over a period of time, the importance of Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana. The extension of 5 years has been provided, under which 5 kgs of free food grains are provided by the government. Then we discussed one nation, one ration card, usage of technology. One nation, one ration card. We have discussed a concept of DBT also, and because PDS is covered under direct benefit transfer. Then we have discussed food grain ATMs to make the distribution much better, much efficient. Food grain ATMs. Then we discussed agriculture credit, short-term credit, medium-term credit, and long-term credit. Up to 15 months, 15 to 5 years, and more than 5 years. Then what are the issues related to agriculture credit in India? Right. Then we have discussed the reforms, priority sector lending, right, promotion of cooperative banking structure, regional rural banks, the concept of small finance banks now. Right. In addition to this, we also discussed Kisan credit card, interest subvention, etc. Right. After that, warehousing, concept of warehousing, what is the need, right? What are the issues of criticism against warehousing in India? What reforms have been taken by the government? For example, we have discussed silo storage, promotion of storage through silos, right? So remember that particular concept. Agriculture infrastructure fund, all of it is going to promote warehousing in India. So after that, APMCs, Agriculture Produce Market Committee, right? APMC laws are formed by the state government, implemented by the respective state government. Right? APMCs are market yards where buyers and sellers will come together, and the farmers will be selling the crop to the buyers. Right? What are the issues? Lack of infrastructure, right? The charges imposed, the multiple licensing, etc. These are the issues related to APMC mandis in India. Then what reforms have been implemented by the government? Concept of e-national agriculture market. E-national agriculture market, ENAM. Right? The government has implemented ENAM through SFAC, and under the ENAM, we are going to integrate all these APMC mandis. Right? We have not connected all of them as of now. More than 1,000 have been linked. And under the ENAM model, the buyers will list their crops on the platform, on the portal. Sellers will list their crop, and buyers will bid. Auctioning will be conducted, and the sale will happen. That is basically concept of ENAM. Then we have discussed the food processing. What is food processing? Conversion of output in agriculture sector from one form to another form. Right? You will convert, let's say, wheat into bread. You will convert wheat into biscuits. You'll convert fruits into juices, etc. All of this is basically a concept of food processing. Why do we require food processing? Because the demand is very high in India. It has export potential. We can produce lot of agriculture commodities in India. Right, our land availability of agriculture land is very high. The climate that is available in India also helps in cultivation of lot of crops in agriculture sector, etc. Then what are the reforms implemented by the government to promote food processing in India? We have discussed the mega food park scheme. We have discussed the PLI, right? We have seen the Pradhan Mantri formalization of micro enterprises, right, etc. Then we discussed what are the issues associated with food processing industries, and that is where we stopped yesterday. Now, questions are there. We'll take up the questions later. Today only we'll discuss, don't worry, both preliminary questions as well as the mains based questions. Now, let me start with the next chapter. Next chapter, industries and services. Industries and services. In this chapter, what we are going to discuss? We'll discuss industrial policies and LPG reforms. For example, what is LPG? Liberalization, privatization, and globalization. Right, back in 1991, Government of India proposed liberalization, privatization, and globalization policies. It is also very famously referred to as New Economic Policy, NEP, New Economic Policy. Now, multiple policies have been announced even before 1991. You don't have to remember all of them. We'll discuss the most important ones. Most important ones we'll discuss today. Disinvestment policy, MSME sector. What are the different types of aggregates such as IIP and ICI? And then we'll discuss the services sector, and finally reforms such as Make in India initiative, Startup India initiative, etc. Now let me start with industrial policies. Let me start with the basics of industrial policy. Under industrial policy, Government of India will basically come out with certain guidelines or measures regarding promotion of industrial sector in India. Is it okay? I'll repeat the statement. Under industrial policy, what does the government do? Government will come out with certain guidelines or with certain right measures using which Government of India wants to promote industrial sector, industrial growth in India. The first industrial policy was announced by the government back in 1948, immediately after independence. Back in 1948, Government of India announced the first ever industrial policy. Now, what are the important provisions? What are the important points in this industrial policy? And many of you will say, sir, is it sufficient? Should we read everything related to industrial policy? My answer is no. Because many of the times, industrial policy documents is a 10 pages, 50 pages, 100-page document. You don't have to read all these pages or remember all the pages. Not at all needed for GS paper 3 for civil services. So what are the important provisions? The industrial policy of 1948, first and foremost, announced Indian economy as a mixed economy. Announced that India will be following a mixed economy model. Now, if you remember the first class of the GS paper 3 discussion that we started in the morning session, please do let me know, did we discuss what is the model of mixed economy? Participate. I know early morning, hardly 10 minutes, right, since you're woken up, but you should remember all of this. Did we discuss the concept of a mixed economy model that India is following? Mixed economy basically means where the production, control of the factors of production, etc., will be done by both government also as well as private sector also. So, model of mixed economy was adopted in the industrial policy of 1948. Second point, in case of industrial policy of 1948, different industries were there. What Government of India did was, we divided these industries into four categories. We divided these industries into four categories: 1, 2, 3, and fourth category. And what was the use of categorization of these industries? Government would decide which industry would be there in each of the category, and based on the categorization, whether private sector will be allowed or only government would be allowed, or both government and private sector would simply be allowed to participate in the industry. For example, under category 1, we identified certain industries. And if you ask me, sir, on what basis we used to identify, government would simply say, based on the national security angle, based on the importance to the economy, based on whether private sector is suitable to involve or to be involved in the sector or not. So different parameters were considered, and based on that, government would decide which industry would be falling in which categorization. For example, under category 1, government of India decided that only the government of India would be setting up these industries. For example, defense sector, railways sector, right? Have a look at this, atomic energy, etc. So government identified certain industries and said, only I will participate in the industry. No private sector from India will be allowed to participate in this. So that was the first category. Second category, already in the second category, certain sectors, private sector was already there. Private sector was already operating. So government of India stated that in the second category, right now, government, right, have a look at this. Government will be there. Private sector, it is already there, and we will allow them to continue. We will simply allow them to continue because private sector already they have certain setup there, or certain companies of private sector already present. So government said, okay, let them continue to operate. Maybe after 10 years, we will look at all these industries. And if I feel that there is a requirement of a government setup, if I feel that there is a requirement of a nationalization, I will be going for that. I will be going for nationalization. I will set up industries in these, right, let's say categories as such. So second category was called as a mixed sector, where private sector, which is already present, we would allow them to continue to operate. But if there is a requirement of a new unit, if there is a need to increase production, right, change the supply, etc., government would be setting up a new unit. Private sector will not be allowed. Government of India would be setting up the new units here. Third category, government of India identified around 18 industries. Government of India identified around 18 industries, and government said, I will not participate here. Private sector will be allowed to participate, but I'll simply regulate these industries. I will regulate these industries. That is, whatever measures are there, whatever guidelines are there, I will simply provide them. Private sector will participate. That was the third categorization. Only regulation will be done by the government, but private sector will be allowed to participate here. And finally, the fourth one, the fourth categorization, government of India said, any other sector, any other industry which is not covered under category 1, 2, and 3, any other industry which is not covered under 1, 2, and 3 will be kept under the fourth category, and we will allow private sector to participate. Government will not participate, private sector would be allowed to participate. For example, private sector means non-government. For example, many of you start asking me, sir, any example of fourth category? Please look at the examples here. Cooperative sector, agriculture sector. All of you okay with this? Cooperatives, industries related to agriculture sector, etc. These are classified under the fourth category. So all of you okay with the classification? All of you okay with the classification? Some of you are asking, sir, give examples of first category. My dear, it is there right above the classification. Please have a look at it. Right, you're still sleepy. Please wake up now. Please have a look at it. In fact, I told you the examples also. Arms and ammunitions, defense sector, railways, atomic energy. It is the right above the classification. Please have a look at it. Okay. All of you okay with this classification? So government of India identified industries and classified the industries. In one category, only government will be present. In second category, private sector is already present. Government said, in future, if there is a requirement, I will enter into this. Third category, only private sector. Right now, government will not enter. And fourth category, private sector. Anything which is not covered 1, 2, and 3 will be kept under fourth category. Can we go forward now? This is industrial policy 1948. The first policy regarding industries that was announced after independence. Now in 1951, Government of India introduced a law. Government of India passed a bill, made introduction of an act. The act very famously is referred to as Industries Development and Regulation Act. Industries Development and Regulation Act, IDRA 1951. Now, what are the important provisions of IDRA 1951? Point number one, Government of India identified certain industries, and these industries which were covered under the Act, now they will have to be registered. I'll repeat the statement. Under the schedule of the Act, because the Act is generally divided into schedules, that should be very clear to you. Polity classes are over. Right? The Act is divided into schedules. So under the schedule, any industry that has been identified, any private sector that is working in these industries, they will have to be registered with the government now. They will have to come under registration. Point number one. Point number two, while getting this registration, while getting the approvals, if you submit any wrong data, if you submit any misleading data, then Government of India will have every right to cancel your license. To cancel your license, government will have every right. Point number three, whenever you have a license now, you have got the approvals of the government, you have a license, and you are operating, you want to expand production, you want to increase production, you want to invest more money, then for all these reasons, for whatever reasons you want to do it, you will have to get the prior approval. You will have to get the permission of the government first. Without getting the approval of the government, you will not be allowed to conduct any other operations. Right? Very restrictive in nature. All I'm trying to tell you is Regulation Act. The name itself will be self-explanatory. It's a Regulation Act, very, very restrictive in nature. So first one, you are covered under the Industrial Development Regulation Act under one of the schedules. Now be registered. Second, while getting the registration, while getting approvals, if you provide any wrong information, we can cancel your license. Third one, for conducting many of these activities, such as investment, such as expansion of production, etc., first to take the approval of the government, only then you are allowed to do all of this. Fourth point, have a look at this. If the company is not working properly, affairs of the company means if the company is utilizing resources but is not able to work correctly or properly, right? The financials of the company are in a disarray, etc. Then have a look at this. The Government of India will have every right to conduct an inquiry against the company. They can initiate an inquiry against this company. Next point, the company has this one already covered. Next point, government will recommend certain reforms. Government will make certain changes to policies. Without any question, you will have to simply follow them. You will have to simply follow these new guidelines, new procedures, new measures announced by the government. Now, what if you say, sir, I'm private sector company, I will not follow the government guidelines? Then government will simply say, if you cannot follow the new policy that we are going to announce, then we will take over ownership of the company. We'll simply take over the management of the company, right? We'll take away the management, the management of the company from the owners. And finally, government was having all the powers under this law. Government had all the powers to regulate how much a supply can be done by the companies, at what price these can sell in the market, etc. How much production will happen, how much supply will happen, at what price these are going to be sold in the market. Government had every power to regulate all these factors of private sector companies. Right, so these are certain very important provisions of Industries Development Regulation Act of 1951. All of you okay with this? Can we go forward? Can we go forward? All of you okay with this? Why there is a difference between the first and the third, my dear? First one, monopoly of the government. Only government will be allowed to participate. No private sector will be allowed to participate. And look at the situation also, right? I hope you understand. Some of you will be looking at these provisions sitting in 2024. You're sitting in 2024 and you're looking at the provisions and saying, this is bad, we should not do it, etc. But you're talking about 1950s, 1948, etc. Look at the situation back then, right? I hope you understand. Government of India at that point of time, 1948, was having more of a role where Government of India wanted to do everything. they did not have so much of faith on the private sector. Or, right, what was our experience with the private sector company, East India Company, EIC? So government of India wanted to do a lot of these activities in the economy rather than allowing the private sector to do it, because population in India was higher than also. The percentage poor population was very high. Government of India was concerned with private sector not doing sufficient for social welfare, because private sector will always run behind profits. Sufficient jobs may not be created. Income inequality will increase. Wealth inequality would start increasing, etc. So citing all these reasons, government of India said, let me control a lot of these industries. Let me regulate, let me impose a lot of regulations on these industries. So that was the background. Please understand the background. Do not try to evaluate these parameters, or let's say provisions, with 2024 viewpoint. Go back in history, look at what was the situation of India in 1950s, then it will start making sense to you. So this is Industries Development Regulation Act of 1951. Then came the most important policy, Industrial Policy of 1956. Very, very important policy. Why? One of the reasons why even today, lot of these industries, why government companies are present, why government has presence in lot of these industries, is because of Industrial Policy of 1956. I repeat the statement. One of the reasons why even today government has presence in lot of these industries dates back to Industrial Policy of 1956. How so? Please look at the categorization now. Unlike earlier situation where in first category where only government had the control, only government presence were there, the sectors, or let's say the industries which were covered, were very, very limited. The industries which were kept under the monopoly of government were very, very limited, very few of them. But in the Industrial Policy of 1956, the situation changed. The government of India now says, no, rather than only covering railways, atomic energy, etc., we will expand the list. We will cover more and more industries where only government of India will have the monopoly. Monopoly in the sense where only government of India shall set up companies. Enterprises were set up only by the government of India. Please look at Schedule A now. Because in the Industrial Policy of 1956, we had three schedules. We basically divided the industries into three schedules: Schedule A, Schedule B, and Schedule C. Most important one is Schedule A. Lot of these industries which were earlier allowed to attract private investments, were allowed to have private sector presence, now were brought under the government control. Were basically brought under the government control. Rather than having very few of these industries, now 17 industries which were important for economy, which were important for national security, which were important to promote growth in the economy, were brought under the complete control of government of India. Where 17 industries were covered under the Schedule A, some of the examples I've given you. Some of the examples I've given. Please do not by heart all the list of 17, 18, etc. That is not required for UPSC. So that was Schedule A, where only government of India shall set up industries, or let's say companies. Now, what if a private sector is already present? Government would simply say, we'll go for nationalization. Do you remember the term nationalization? Government of India would simply say, we will go for nationalization. Nationalization simply means transfer of ownership. Transfer of ownership from private sector to government. For example, please look at one of the industry here, coal sector. Indira Gandhi government, when Indira Gandhi was the prime minister, Indira Gandhi government passed laws to nationalize coal in India. There were coal mines nationalization act that were introduced and passed by the government. So logic was very simple. Government said, I want to control this. I want to have ownership of these industries. So Schedule A, 17 industries were brought under the control of government. Schedule B included 12 industries. Where private sector is present, we will allow the private sector to operate. But in the future, if there is a requirement of any new unit, if there is a requirement of one more company, government will do it. Private sector entry will further not be allowed. included 12 industries where development of new units would be taken up by Government of India, but private sector participation was allowed. Because private sector was already present, we will allow them to operate. And finally, Schedule C, whatever industries were not covered under A and B were kept to be covered under Schedule C. Very simple logic. We have identified 17, keep them under A. We have identified 12, keep them under B. Whatever is left out, any other industry that is left out of these 29, we will keep it under Schedule C. Again, before you start asking, sir, any example of this? Agriculture, cooperatives, etc. All of them were kept under Schedule C only. And please understand, now many of you will start asking me, why? Why did Government of India do this? What was the reason? Why did Government of India suddenly shift their policy like this from very few industries with under monopoly of government to 17 industries under the monopoly of the government? Reason is very simple. Do not try to read all these industrial policies individually. Many of you will try to read them individually, get confused. My recommendation, my advice to you is try to connect with the events that are happening in that particular time period in Indian economy. For example, how do you understand the importance of industrial policy in 1956? 1956 is also known for second 5-year plan. We have not yet discussed this. I know, please do not tell me you have not discussed. We have not discussed. I know that. 5-year plan, we'll discuss it. Planning concept, we'll discuss. 1956 is also known for launch of the second 5-year plan. Now, even if you have remembered what you have studied in your high school regarding the planning in India, second 5-year plan is known for heavy industrialization. Second 5-year plan is also known for heavy industrialization. That is, it was basically a plan where industrialization was promoted by the government. Industrialization was promoted. And why this is called as heavy industrialization plan? Logic is simple. Please look at the terminology. Today I will tell you, when I'm discussing planning, don't ask me about this again. Whenever you talk about industries, you can divide them into two parts: light industry and heavy industry. One is called as light industry and second one is called as heavy industry. Right now you'll ask me, sir, what do you mean by light and heavy? Heavy industries are those where investment requirement is very, very high. I'll repeat the statement. Heavy industries are those where investment requirements are very, very high. Output is also very, very high. For example, shipbuilding. Please do let me know. Shipbuilding, right? Aeroplane manufacturing, steel production. How many of you think to manufacture a ship, to manufacture an aeroplane, you need to invest a very small amount of money? Does it make sense to you? If you look at the examples, automatically does it make sense to you? Where the output value is very high, where investment requirements is also very, very high. These are generally called as heavy industries. Heavy industries. On the other side, you have light industries. Let me start with a very simple example. Light industries, right? Let's say example of CD manufacturing, compact drives, CD manufacturing, right? Or manufacturing of radios, manufacturing of many other products, right? Where investment requirement is comparatively very, very less. Investment requirement is very, very less, comparatively very less. Don't say, sir, here also I need to spend more. Compare that with manufacturing of aeroplane. Think logically, comparatively. So in comparison, in light industries, investment requirement is very, very less, right? Comparatively very less, right? Output value is also comparatively very less. Hence, these are called as light industries and heavy industries. So in 1956, Government of India, through the second 5-year plan, second 5-year plan is also referred to as Mahalanobis plan. Mahalanobis plan, right? Why? PC Mahalanobis. There was a statistician by the name of PC Mahalanobis. PC Mahalanobis was an architect. Basically, he was the very important person in order to make the second 5-year plan. He played a very important role in making of the second 5-year plan. That is the precise reason. That is the precise reason why this is also referred to as Mahalanobis plan or Mahalanobis strategy. The objective of second 5-year plan was very simple. They said we are dependent on imports. We are heavily dependent on imports. And in order to reduce our import dependence, what we need to do is promote production of goods in India. We need to promote production of goods in India. What kind of goods? We should promote production of capital goods, machineries. We must promote the production of it. We must promote the production of consumer goods, so that the production of heavy goods as well as the consumer goods is done in Indian market rather than importing. Now will become self-reliant, will become Atmanirbhar. Because one of the objectives of planning commission, please remember this, the idea of Atmanirbhar, although it has been floated by the government very recently, even in the past also, that is the planning commission also wanted to reduce import dependence and promote self-reliance. That is nothing but Atmanirbharta. So earlier also we have tried it. It has not worked out in India, right? It has been tried out. So I hope you understand now why government of India decided, let me bring most of these important industries under the coverage of government of India. That is under the monopoly of government of India. All of you okay with this? Does it make economic sense now? Are you able to connect the dots? Why rather than having 3 to 4, now 17 have been brought under the monopoly of government of India. Okay, so Schedule A, Schedule B and Schedule C. Some were saying Schedule C or the categorization 4 is confusing. My dear, it's very simple. Multiple industries are there. I'll talk about 1948. Multiple industries are there. We have brought some of these industries under category 1, some in 2, some in 3. So when you bring in 1, 2 and 3, some of them will be left out. Whatever is not covered under 1, 2 and 3 will be kept under category 4. In case of the scheduling here, in case of 1956, we have brought 17 in Schedule A, 12 in Schedule B. But beyond this also, there will be many more industries. Government of India said whatever is not covered under A and B automatically will be covered under C. Right? That is basically the concept of having a Schedule C or Category 4 in industrial policy in 1956 and 1948 respectively. Okay, industrial policy of 1956. Now tell me, right? Can you see why even today government of India is present in lot of industries in India? Let me know. Can you see the historical context why government of India is present in lot of these industries in India? Right, civil aviation until very recently it was present. Telecom sector it is present. Right, steel sector it is present. Aluminium sector it is present. Right, you can see in many of these industries the presence of government of India is present even today, but we are reducing the presence. We are trying to give more and more of these industries to private sector. Why, you will understand after some time. So one is 1948, second one is the Act of 1951, third one is 1956. After 1956 also multiple industrial policies have been announced. Right? Multiple policies have been announced. You don't have to, as far as I'm concerned, you don't have to remember all these industrial policies apart from these 3 important ones. And the fourth most important one is the industrial policy of 1991. Industrial policy of 1991. Now, what was the reason why government of India proposed an industrial policy in 1991? The reason is simple. India was facing a crisis. Indian economy was facing a crisis. What kind of crisis? The fiscal deficit of government of India was very, very high. Government was borrowing heavily from the market. Second, inflation rate in domestic market. Inflation rate in domestic market was also increasing. Third point, out of the total expenditure annually, whatever was the expenditure budgeted by the government, more than 1/3 of the total expenditure went in the form of interest payments. Out of the total budgeted expenditure, 1/3 of the total expenditure were in the form of interest payments. What is the meaning of this? I've given the data also, you can have a look at it. What is the meaning of this? If you remember the fiscal policy chapter that we have discussed a couple of weeks ago, right now is it okay? Do you remember this? Is it okay if I say around 1/5 of the total expenditure in a year, it is because of interest payments? Let me know. Right? If you're confused, open the fiscal policy chapter. Please look at, right, where government of India spends money, and you will realize that around 20% is in the form of interest payment. So just have a look at it. Now it is around 20%. Even then we are concerned. Back in 1991, it was more than 36%. It was more than 36%. That is, out of your total expenditure in 1 year, more than one third was just in the form of interest payment. So you can imagine to what extent the finances of the government of India had constraints there. Rather than spending on development of infrastructure, social welfare, etc., we are repaying. We are paying interest 37%. That's very, very high. Very, very high. You'll have to reduce it. So one, fiscal deficit was very high. Interest payment in a budgeted expenditure was very high. Inflation rate in multiple months, in multiple years, went into double digits. It was in double digits. Inflation rate was in double digits. And there was one event that was taking place in the Middle East. There was one event that was taking place in the Middle East, which is famously referred to as Gulf crisis. Gulf crisis. Right? What happened in Gulf crisis? Very simple. Two countries were fighting a war. And before you start asking me, sir, which are the two countries? Iraq and Kuwait. There was a war between Iraq and Kuwait. Iraq invaded Kuwait, and there was a war between these two countries. Now, what is the impact of this war? Why should this war affect India? Very simple logic. Point number one, these two countries, even today, these two countries are very important in terms of crude oil supply. Correct? Right? Even today, these are very important in terms of crude oil supply. And when two countries which are involved in crude oil supply are fighting with each other, what do you think will happen to supply of crude oil to the international market? Supply of crude oil to the international market was affected. And anyways, if two countries are fighting, automatically crude oil prices will start increasing. Crude oil prices started increasing. And it should be surprising to you. Just like today, back in 1990s also, we were dependent on import of crude oil. So on one side, crude oil prices are rising up. Second, right, you are importing a lot of crude oil. So now tell me, can I simply say, this is a perfect mixture for creation of balance payment crisis? In fact, there is one more point I'll add to this. It's a perfect mixture to create BOP crisis in a country. And one more important point was, lot of Indians were working in these countries. In the Middle East region, even today this is correct. Lot of Indians were working in this region, and when there is a war, people will lose wages. When there is war, people will lose salary, jobs, etc. They will lose assets, income, all of it. And when they lose all of it, please tell me, will the remittances to India, will the remittances which are coming to India, will it be affected or not? Will the remittances which are coming into India, will they be affected? Of course, answer is yes. Remittances were affected to a very great extent. So inflow of dollar affected, crude oil prices is increasing, outflow of dollar is continuously increasing. So don't you think that will lead to balance of payment crisis? Correct? Does it make sense to you? All of these factors will lead to a BOP crisis, and that is the reason 1991 we faced a BOP crisis. The forex reserves were depleting very, very fast, and at one point of time, the amount of forex reserves that were there with us was simply sufficient to pay for imports for 15 days. We had an import cover of only 15 days. Now, what do you mean by import cover here? Please remember this. There's a term called as import cover. Import cover simply means how much forex reserves you have. How much forex reserves you have divided by what is the value of monthly imports. How much forex reserves you have divided by value of monthly imports. What is the value of monthly imports that you are doing? A very simple question to you. Please look at the formula. Is it okay if I say import cover should be very, very high. Let me know, I'll repeat it again. Please look at the formula. It's not at all difficult. Please look at the formula. Is it okay if I say import cover should not decrease? Import cover should always be higher, so that it simply indicates that a country can absorb any kind of issue. A country can always honor payment for imports in terms of dollars. All of you okay with this? So when your forex reserves will fall, when your forex reserves will fall, and right, the value of imports is increasing because of the crude oil, don't you think import cover will start falling down? Simple C set concept. Numerator falling down, denominator increasing. What will happen to the outcome? The outcome will also start falling down. Correct? The outcome, the result will also start coming down. So import cover started declining very, very fast. Cause of concern. Even today, whenever you want to measure how much forex reserves we have, remember this. Even today, if you want to measure what is the strength of your forex reserves, just the number, just the value of forex reserves is not sufficient. I hope you understand. Just the number, just how much forex reserves you have, it's not sufficient to measure what is the strength of forex reserves. Because let me give you one example. Please tell me. Example one, your forex reserves are $650 billion. Forex reserves are $650 billion, and the value of imports is $50 billion. Example 2, your forex reserves are $750 billion, and the value of imports is $250 billion. Just by looking at forex reserves, right, do you think that information is sufficient for you? Think of it. Just think of it. Just looking at the forex reserves, RBI will report saying that forex reserves for India have increased from $650 billion to $750 billion. Is it sufficient to find out how effectively can you control the outflow of dollars? Absolutely no. Is it sufficient to find out to what extent, if there is an outflow of dollars, can you manage the situation? Absolutely no. Import cover is a better indicator. Import cover is always a better indicator. And if you're reading newspapers very carefully, in the last 1 year, there has been a fluctuation in the import cover. In the last 1 year, there has been a fluctuation in the import cover. Import cover has been fluctuating. Why? Russia-Ukraine war. Russia-Ukraine war. And sudden impact of Russia-Ukraine war was fertilizer cost increased. The gas prices have increased. And the crude oil prices have increased. So don't you think automatically the denominator will start increasing? Correct? Denominator will start increasing, and when the denominator starts increasing, automatically the import cover will start falling down. So I hope you understand. All of these are interconnected. Why I'm talking so much about it? Can you connect the same thing with Red Sea issue now? Think of it. Can you connect the same thing with what is happening in the Red Sea now? Can UPSC ask a question where the headline is Red Sea and one of the point is import cover? Can they ask? Of course, yes. Many of you simply say, what is the connection? What is happening in Red Sea should not be affecting import cover of India. No, my dear, that will definitely have an impact. Okay. So these kind of interconnections can be made by UPSC. Just be very, very careful. Okay. So performance of the public sector units, the entities which were owned by the government, was also very poor. Government was basically ensuring, government through these public sector units wanted to provide social welfare, increase growth, create employment, etc. But a lot of these were incurring losses. And when these public sector units incur losses, Government of India has to provide finance for them. It's very logical. Government of India provided finance for them. For example, many of you simply say, sir, why should government provide financing? Air India. Do you remember a company by the name of Air India? Not the current Air India, but the one which was owned by Government of India years ago. Air India was one of the public sector units owned by Government of India. But many years, now it is privatized. Now it is owned by Tata company. Many years before it was privatized, Air India incurred losses. Air India kept on incurring losses. And when companies owned by Government of India are incurring losses, who will have to provide assistance to them? Who will have to provide financing for them? It has to be done by Government of India. So you are using taxpayers' money to provide financing for loss-making companies. Right? Can I give you one more example for this? BSNL. All of you reading this? BSNL. Right? So even in case of BSNL, is it a profit-making entity now? No, it is not making profits. It is incurring losses. And every now and then you will read in the newspaper, government is announcing certain financial assistance to BSNL. So rather than government earning money in the form of dividends, government in fact ends up paying lot of money to continue the operations of these companies. That is a problem. That is a concern. That should not happen. Okay. So these are certain points to represent what was the crisis-like situation in Indian economy. Now, in order to overcome the issue of crisis, to address the issues which are plaguing Indian economy, Government of India announced a policy very famously referred to as LPG reforms, liberalization, privatization, and globalization. Liberalization, privatization, and globalization. I'm using the term LPG. Some of the books will use the term NEP, new economic policy. New economic policy. They will also refer to this as a new industrial policy, new economic policy, or LPG reforms. Now, what are the three very important pillars under LPG? And while discussing LPG, we'll discuss a lot of current affairs. So listen carefully. First one is the liberalization. What do you mean by liberalization? What is the meaning of the term liberalization? Please understand. Liberalization simply means deregulation. Liberalization simply means deregulation. Deregulation means what? Whatever regulations were imposed by the government earlier. Can I take simple one example? Simple one example. I'll tell you many later. Simple one example. If you remember, industrial policy of 1956. If you remember, industrial policy of 1956, is it okay if I say lot of these industries were brought under the control of Government of India? Correct? Lot of these industries were brought under the control of Government of India. And in lot of these industries, private sector entry was not allowed. Private sector entry was not allowed. Only Government of India would set up a company in the industry. Can I call this as a regulation? Correct? Can I call this as a regulation? Now, what do you mean by deregulation? Deregulation simply means such conditions, such measures, such provisions, or in simple terms, such regulations were withdrawn by the government. Such regulations were removed by the government. Deregulations. Right? Deregulations means regulations are taken back. Regulations are withdrawn by the government, which means even in the industries which were covered only by the government earlier, now government will allow private sector also to participate. Government is already present. Now government will allow private sector also to participate. Right? So deregulations were implemented. That is basically concept of liberalization. Next one is privatization. What do you mean by privatization? Government will be selling ownership of the companies owned by it. Very simple. Government will be selling the ownership of companies which are under the ownership of government. That is called as privatization. Asset sale. Sale of the asset is done under privatization. What do you mean by globalization? Globalization simply means under this policy, government will allow flow of factors from India to rest of the world and from the rest of the world to India. Are all the 3 points clear to you? We'll take up individually all the 3, but just in a nutshell. Liberalization means withdraw, remove the regulations. Privatization, sell the ownership, sell away the ownership. Why they will do, what is the concern, etc. We'll discuss it separately. Third one, globalization. We will promote flow of factors. Flow of factors means what? Imports of goods and services, exports of goods and services, labor moving into India, labor moving out of India, investments coming into India, investments moving out of India, right? So flow of factors will be allowed under the concept of globalization. So all the three reforms were implemented. Different reforms were implemented under all the three pillars by Government of India. Can we go forward now? Isn't privatization, liberalization same, my dear? Telecom sector. I'll take a current affairs example. Telecom sector. BSNL is present. Earlier, only BSNL was allowed. Correct? Earlier, only BSNL was allowed. Now, along with BSNL, the regulations have been removed. Private sector is also operating along with BSNL. Anybody has a doubt? Let me know. I'm talking about regulation now. I'm talking about liberalization. Earlier, only government sector was allowed, BSNL. Now, along with BSNL, private sector will also be allowed, deregulation. Now, if BSNL is sold away, if BSNL is sold to a private sector company, that becomes privatization. So, privatization is different, liberalization is different. Both are not one and the same. Okay, now let's take up all the three pillars individually. Let's try and understand different measures. Liberalization, it means to free the economy from the direct or physical controls which were imposed by the government under earlier policies. Whatever controlling measures were implemented by the government, we are withdrawing, removing these controlling measures, hence called as liberalization. What kind of examples can you think of? For example, industries. In case of industries, earlier, a lot of industries had only government participation. Right? The industrial policy of 1956, if you remember, 17 industries had presence of only government of India. Now, government of India said, no, I will not keep all these industries only under myself. I will allow private sector to participate. I will allow the private sector also to participate. So the concept of industrial sector allowing private sector participation, even in those where only government was allowed, was introduced. Industrial licensing was abolished. For many of these industries, today you do not require a licensing. But please understand, there are certain industries even today. There are certain industries even today where you require licensing first. For example, alcoholic production. Alcoholic production. Think of it, right? Don't you think there is a requirement of a license? You are supposed to take a license to start producing alcohol in India. Otherwise, what does it mean if there was no licensing requirement? Licensing means take the approval first. Registration is different. Licensing is different. I hope you understand the difference between both of them. Many of you will say, but sir, we are registered with the government. My dear, registration is different. You're simply telling to the government that I'm setting up a company. That is registration. Licensing means even before you set up, before you start manufacturing, you are supposed to take permission of the government. That is licensing. So even today, for alcoholic production, in space industry, hazardous chemicals, explosive industry, etc., there is a licensing requirement. But for majority of them, licensing mandate, licensing requirement has been removed. Right? De-licensing measures were implemented. Industries which were reserved only for public sector enterprise. PSE means public sector enterprises. Industries which were reserved only for the PSEs now have been de-reserved. Even private sector is allowed to participate in this. For example, telecom sector, right? Is private sector allowed? Civil aviation, coal sector, steel sector, right? Is private sector participation allowed? Of course, yes. Of course, yes. Private sector participation is allowed in lot of them now. But understand this, even after this, Government of India, even today, has kept some of the industries under its control only. Right? Even today, some of the industries, right? In fact, it is only one industry now, atomic energy. Atomic energy. Even today, atomic energy is under the complete control of the government. Complete control. Government will do everything in atomic energy. Right? Earlier, even railways was under the complete control of the government. But you please tell me, if you're reading newspapers, is it okay if I say even in railways now, private sector entry is allowed? Let me know. Even in railways, and all of this is from current affairs. Even in railways, private sector entry is allowed. Answer is yes, by the way. Right? It is allowed. Private sector companies have been asked to operate, allowed to operate railway routes now. Until very recently, only government of India used to do that. Now even private sector entry is allowed. Right? So markets were allowed to determine the prices. Right? Why this is important? Please go back to IDRA. Please go back to Industrial Development Regulation Act. Right? Who would have a regulatory control over the pricing of a product, quantity of production, the supply of the products in the market? Government had the power. Now market will decide the prices. Some of the goods which are reserved for SSI means small scale industry. Small scale industry, SSI is nothing but small scale industry, were de-reserved. Now what is the meaning of this? Please understand. Today what we call MSME. Do you remember MSME? We have not discussed completely regarding MSME, but we have seen what is the definition of MSME. Micro, small, medium enterprises. Earlier, right, the MSMEs were called as a small scale industries. SSI, small scale industries. Now, earlier, in order to protect small scale industries, under different industrial policies, for example, industrial policy of 1956 also covered SSI. Earlier it was called as SSI. IP 1956 also had a provision regarding SSI. What government of India did in order to protect these small scale industries was that certain goods were identified and were reserved to be produced only by the SSI. Is it okay? I'll repeat it. Certain goods were identified and these goods were to be produced only by the SSI. Other companies, larger companies, will not be allowed to produce it. So what do you mean by this? Let's imagine one example. Let's say this marker. Okay. Let's imagine one example. Marker and your friend is back, bottle. Now government of India will identify both of these products and will reserve them. Reserve means what? Now both of these products can be manufactured only by the small scale industry. Can Reliance manufacture this? Not allowed. Can, right, let's say Tata company manufacture these two products? Not allowed. Can any other company, bigger company, which is not a small scale industry, allowed to manufacture this? Not at all allowed. We would never allow this. But what is the problem with this policy? Why did we go for de-reservation? At one point of time, more than 600 products, 700 products were reserved to be manufactured by small scale industry. But you think of it, yesterday's discussion, if you remember it, is it okay if I say, if you reserve a product only to be manufactured by the small scale industry, competition will not be very high there. That is, investment will be limited, right? The quantity of production will be limited, kind of technology they are using is limited. So competitiveness will be very much limited there. All of you okay with this argument? So this actually led to, right, the small industries remaining small only. For example, look at this very carefully. Listen to my argument now. I have invested certain amount of money. I'm a micro enterprise. Okay, I'm micro enterprise, or let's say I'm a small scale industry. I've invested money. I'm manufacturing this bottle, and this bottle is a reserved. It is a reserved product, which means only small scale industry is allowed to manufacture, larger companies not allowed. Now please do let me know, if I increase my investment, is there a danger that I'll be crossing the threshold investment as per my categorization under MSME? Please participate. Understand the logic behind all of this. If I invest, that is, if you remember MSME, okay, highest amount of investment under the MSME was 50 crore rupees. Now imagine I will invest more than 50. Now please tell me, is there a danger that I will lose a certification of MSME? Correct? I will lose a certification of MSME. And if I lose the certification of MSME, can I manufacture this bottle now? which is reserved for MSME, again earlier called as SSI, can I manufacture this bottle? No, I will not be allowed to manufacture this bottle. So what I'll do? I will never cross my investment. I will never take my investment above 50 crore. And if I do not take my investment above 50 crore, don't you think perpetually means as long as I'm manufacturing, my manufacturing will be limited. The scope of employment generation will also be limited, etc. So I hope you understand. That is the reason even in India today, the criticism is that most of the MSMEs are micro enterprises. Around 99% of the MSMEs are micro enterprises. And one of the reason why they remained very small was because of reservation, because of this kind of a reservation of products. So what government of India did? Gradually, they have de-reserved all of these products. Today, if you ask me, sir, is there any product which is reserved to be manufactured only by MSME? Answer is no. I hope you understand this. Today, if you ask me, sir, is there any product which is to be manufactured only by MSME? Answer is no. There is no reservation list for MSMEs now. Okay, so these are some of the reforms under the industrial sector. What about financial sector? Now the banks were allowed to go to stock market, issue shares in the stock market, raise capital. Foreign banks were allowed to come into India. Right, so have a look at this. Banks are allowed to raise funds from the market. Setting up of private and foreign banks were allowed now. Foreign institutional investors, FII means foreign institutional investors. The inflow, right, that is foreign institutional investors were allowed to invest in Indian stock market, Indian bond market. Hence, the inflow of dollars into India increased. Next, taxation reforms. Lot of reforms have been implemented under taxation act. For example, government of India set up a committee, Raja-Chalia committee, very old committee, Raja-Chalia committee. It recommended changes and many of the changes were implemented. For example, earlier corporate tax rates in India were higher. Now these have been reduced. To promote MSME sector, corporate tax rates have been reduced in India. Individual income taxes have been changed over a period of time. So even taxation reforms were implemented, regulations were loosened, regulations were taken back. Foreign exchange reforms. Rupee was devalued by the government. This was the last time when government of India devalued rupee. Please remember this. During the crisis, rupee was devalued by the government. Right? Why? With the devaluation, is it okay? Think of it. With the devaluation, inflow of remittances is expected to increase. Point number one. Let me know whether this is okay or not okay. We have discussed it. We are just compiling it now. With the devaluation of your domestic currency, inflow of remittances is expected to increase. Second, imports will become very costly. Unnecessary imports or non-essential imports, to a certain extent, we can control. Your export competitiveness will increase. Will keep on increasing. Okay, right? So foreign exchange reforms. One, rupee was devalued, and slowly and gradually we shifted the exchange rate to floating exchange rate in India. At post 1991, slowly and steadily, that is, if you remember, dual exchange rate was introduced. Later, we have introduced a floating exchange rate under which we are making the current account in the balance of payment completely convertible, fully convertible. Right? So exchange rate was determined by the market forces. We introduced full convertibility under the current account. Okay. Next, trade policy. Import licensing was abolished. Now, that is the reason, please understand this. Import licensing was abolished. What do you mean by import licensing was abolished? Earlier, before 1991, if you are importing something, you will have to take a license first. You'll have to get a license first. Only then you are allowed to import. Government of India said, until unless I identify certain products and I ask you to get a license, no import licensing will not be required. Now, please tell me, does it make sense why very recently, when government of India introduced a policy saying that if you're going to import a PC, if you're going to import a laptop, etc., there were certain criticisms, there were certain issues raised, and one of the issue was that are we reintroducing import licensing in India? Are we reversing the earlier policies which were implemented by the government? Did you come across these arguments? Think of it and do let me know. Did you come across these arguments? Of course, yes, these arguments were raised, right? One of the argument was, are we basically going back to licensing regime? Are we going to introduce a licensing Raj regime then, right? Why it is called as a licensing Raj? There's a term called as licensing Raj. Why this is called as a licensing Raj? Please understand. Whenever government says you'll have to take a license, it simply means you'll have to go to government officials. Now, please tell me, how many of you think it is very easy, very swiftly, you will get licenses from government officials? Think of it. How many of you are under the impression that once you apply for license, government officials on their toe, right? They will come to you, they will give you everything, whatever assistance you will require, and within couple of days you will get a license? No, right? Generally it doesn't happen. Do not write it in the exam, but generally it doesn't happen. Why? There is a lot of red tapeism in India. There is a lot of red tapeism. Purposely the guidelines, again, I cannot say purposely, let's say the guidelines are so difficult to understand, comprehend, and follow when you apply for a license. It's very, very difficult. That is called as red tapeism. And whenever these kind of licensing regimes are implemented, red tapeism is there in the system, that will breed corruption in the system. That will breed a lot of corruption in the system. Please remember this. That is the reason, if you remember, the current government says their agenda is minimum government, maximum governance. Correct? Their agenda, right? One of their central themes is minimum government, maximum governance. Right? Wherein, right, governance will be the priority, not having a larger government. Right? So that is the reason there was a criticism, and later that is the reason government said, this is not a licensing Raj. This is not a licensing Raj. It is simply an import management system. Correct? All of you are reading newspapers. This is not a licensing Raj. It is simply an import management system. That's it. Why are we putting in place an import management system? We are worried about national security. We are worried about trusted sources, whether the laptops, PCs, etc. that we are importing, are they from a trusted source or not? We are concerned about it. That is the precise reason we are putting in place an import management system. Why I'm talking about all of this is there is a historical connection. And second point, if you have read newspapers, I don't think so this was covered in Hindu, but if you've read newspapers, in the last couple of days, there is a talk. USA government wants more clarity from government of India regarding import management system. Check it later, right? Go to Google and check it. You will get articles regarding this. The USA government says they want more clarity from government of India regarding this import management system. What are they trying to do? What is the objective? Through what measures we are trying to manage the imports, etc. Right? These kind of clarifications have been asked. These kind of clarifications have been asked from government of India by the USA government. Right? So again, there's a historical connection like this with all of this. So please be very careful. So import licensing was abolished. Removal of export duties was also done, so that more and more exports will flow from India to rest of the world. So these are some of the measures which are implemented by the government under the concept of liberalization. Now let's go to privatization. Let's go to privatization. Under privatization, first one, what is the definition? What is the definition of privatization? Privatization simply means government will be selling the ownership of its entities. Government will be selling the ownership of its entities, right? And it will reduce the ownership. How many companies are there under government? That will be reduced. Private sector ownership of these companies will be increased. That is a basic idea for privatization. That's a basic idea for privatization. Any example of privatization in India? The best example in recent times, the best example that I can think of is Air India. Correct? The most recent, and it is not even difficult to remember also. It's not difficult to remember. Everybody knows the name of Air India. At least I hope so. So Air India is the prime example, the most recent example of privatization being conducted by the government. Now, question is, sir, why does government go for a privatization? Is there any logic behind it? I'll come to that. Just give me some time. In the earlier situation, through industrial policy 1948, 1956, etc., Government of India has increased its presence in multiple industries. In multiple industries, companies, enterprises have been established by Government of India, where complete investment has been done by the government. Right? So as a result of privatization, what you can see is now public sector means companies owned by the government. So the public sector will start contracting, that will come down. It will lead to a lot of disinvestment policies by the government. I'll come to disinvestment. Just give me a minute. I'll discuss disinvestment. It will also increase participation of the private sector. And please understand, participation of private sector will always promote competition. It will promote more and more competition in the economy. Now, what is the meaning of the term disinvestment? Right? What is the meaning of the term disinvestment here? Generally, please understand this. Government of India's policy, Government of India's documents generally say that whenever government will sell certain ownership, but not the complete ownership. Understand the meaning of this. When Government of India will sell ownership in companies, not the complete ownership, only a part of the ownership, and will still have management control, that will be called as a disinvestment. Sir, what do you mean by this? What do you mean by this? Let me give you an example. Listen very carefully. Imagine there is a company ABC which is 100% owned by Government of India. Right now, let's say 100% of this company ABC is owned by Government of India. Now, there are different possibilities when I say government is selling ownership. When I say government selling ownership, there are different possibilities. Okay. One possibility, government will sell 10% ownership. Government will sell 10% ownership. Now, please tell me, if I call this as example 1, can I say under example 1, even after selling 10% ownership, government will have management control over company ABC? Correct? Government will still have management control over ABC. Government will control ABC because remember the number here, any company where a owner will have at least 51%. Any company where the owner, right, because shareholders are owners, where the owner has at least 51% will have the management control over the company. Just to make it much more interesting and clear to all of you, do you remember Adani company purchasing at least 51% in NDTV last year? Correct or wrong? Adani company purchasing around 54 to 55% of shares, right, or ownership or stake in NDTV. Why not 100%? Why just more than 51%? Because logic is anybody who will control at least 51%, anyone who will control or have ownership of at least 51% will have the control over management of the company. So example 1, company is being sold, that is 10% of the company is being sold. But even today, after 10% sale, government will have management control over the company. Second example, government will sell 60% of the company. Government will sell 60% of the company. Now, very simple question to you people. If government will sell you, right? Imagine you are the buyer, right? Be happy. You are a billionaire now. You are purchasing 60% ownership from the company which is owned by the government. So when you purchase 60% ownership, can I say this is also sale of ownership by the government? Correct? Question number 1. This is sale of ownership by the government. Yes. And second one, by selling 60% ownership to you, can I say government has lost management control over the company? Right? Government has lost management control over the company. Government doesn't have the management control. You have the management control. This is also a possibility. This is also a possibility. Although government doesn't generally go for this. Generally, government doesn't adopt this. And third example, extreme case. Third example, government will sell 100% ownership in the company. What do you mean government selling 100% owner, 100% ownership? Government will give the complete company to you only, and government will collect money from you. Now, can I simply say this is also selling ownership? This is also selling ownership? Of course, yes. So right now, please remember this. Please remember this. Whenever government will sell ownership and still have management control, such a policy, government will call this as disinvestment policy. Although terminology disinvestment means selling. Invest, disinvest. And some of you will have this doubt. Invest, opposite of invest is disinvest. So what do you mean by disinvest? Disinvest means you are selling the security, getting money. Understand the economic concept. Understand the economic concept. Government might use it in a different way, but you understand. Right? Can I write it like this? Invest and disinvest. Invest and disinvest. Opposite to each other. What do you mean by invest? What do you mean by invest? You will give me 100 rupee and you will purchase this security. Can I call this as invest? All of you okay? Please participate. I want to know whether you're understanding or not. That is very important for me. You will give me 100 rupees. I will give you this security. Can I call yours is invest? You are investing. That is, you are converting money into a security. That is investment. On the other side, disinvest means I will sell the security back to you. I'm the government. I'm the government. I will sell the share to you. Right? Investment. The security. I will sell this security to you. I will get money. So can I say now I've converted security into money? In disinvestment, I've converted security instrument into money. So disinvestment generally means, it's a very basic idea. Disinvestment generally means you have securities, you will sell it, you will get money. Securities are converted into money. That is called as disinvestment. But Government of India says, whenever I sell ownership, but still have management control, I will call that policy as disinvestment. Right? Is it okay with all of you? Is it okay? Now, before I explain to you different types of disinvestments, let me explain to you the government organizations first. Whenever you talk about government organizations, there can be three types of government organizations. Right? There can be three types of government organizations. Okay, before I go forward, any doubts? Let me know if there are any doubts. Let me address, then I'll go forward with government organizations. So selling 10% share is not disinvestment. My dear, listen carefully, no? If government out of 100% will sell 10%, even then government will have control over the management. Correct? Government will have control over the management. So whenever government will sell ownership, still have control over the management, that is disinvestment according to government policy. According to liberalization, pre-approval required from government for startup, major control vests with government. Is this correct? What context are you talking? In startups? No, in startups, private sector will have the ownership. Sir, will not allowing big businesses, MSME would eat up small businesses. That's the reason I said, listen to me very carefully. I said, government in order to protect MSMEs. Are you able to understand my statement here? Government in order to protect MSMEs did not allow the bigger companies to manufacture the product. But that actually led to inefficiency. Right? Because understand this, I'll compare it with certain other current affairs concepts you'll understand or topics you'll understand. If you're not allowing competition, a small company is there, if you're not going to allow it to compete with bigger companies and you're allowing only small companies to compete with each other, don't you think efficiency will not be promoted there? Please think of it. Please think of it. Right? You are not allowing companies, a very small company, to compete with bigger company. Is there a danger there? Of course, yes, danger is there. But imagine if this smaller company is efficient enough, it is competitive enough, it can give equal competition to very big company as well. But by not allowing the competition between a bigger company and smaller companies, are we not promoting inefficiency in the system? Of course, yes, we are promoting it. I'll give you one example. I'll give you one simple example. I don't know how many of you have read this. It was there a couple of years ago in the newspaper, not recent one, couple of years ago. When Uber was about to enter into India, when Amazon was about to enter into India, the domestic companies at that point of time were Ola and Flipkart. They demanded, or they requested, they cannot demand, at least they can request. So they requested government of India that if you open up the market, if you open up, let's say, retailing segment, e-retailing, that is basically Amazon and Flipkart, and if you open up, right, taxi hailing services to foreign investment, Indian companies will not be able to sustain competition with foreign companies. So they asked government of India, can you protect us? Can you protect us by not allowing foreign companies to enter into India in these sectors for certain time period? Can I connect it to one more current affairs concept? Let me see how many of you are reading. In very recent times, is there a discussion whether to allow foreign company cars to be imported into India without any tariff? Let me say, I'll repeat it again. Current affairs. In fact, if you want to understand this concept much better way, yesterday in Business Standard, there was a very big article, very big article. Should we allow importing of foreign cars into India without any tariffs? Should we allow it? Some of the industry experts say, no, we should not allow it. Why? It will hamper domestic manufacturing. And some of the industry experts, that is basically one which is headed by Maruti Suzuki, the owner of Maruti Suzuki, says, no problem, open it up. Let's allow free imports. Free imports means without any tariffs. Let's allow free imports of manufactured cars into India. Indian car manufacturing is mature enough. We are competitive enough. We will take care of it. So I hope you understand the current affairs concept also. Connection to the current affairs concept. Okay. So again, the point is very simple here. The MSMEs would struggle against a bigger company. So government of India had a reserved list for them. But by not allowing you to compete with the bigger company, that basically many inefficient companies will continue to sustain in the market. Okay. Sir, when we had cheap labor in 1950s, what exactly did second 5-year plan for industrial development work? Regarding second 5-year plan, please hold on to your question. We will address it when I take up planning. Right? The bigger problem with second 5-year plan was there was no framework within that. We wanted to promote employment. There was no policy to promote employment. We did not have labor production policy or job generation policy. We wanted to promote manufacturing in India. Consumer goods should be manufactured in India. That was under the second 5-year plan. But we did not have capital industries in India. We did not have machineries in India. We ended up importing. So second 5-year plan wanted to reduce import dependence. But because of the second 5-year plan, we ended up importing more into India. Right? So there are certain issues. Don't worry. Sir, why government is not turning or selling loss-making companies? I'll come to that. Right now, current government is actually doing it. Right? Again, there's a policy. I'll come to that. Just give me some time. Privatization is complete selling and disinvestment is still retaining management control. According to the government policy, again, understand this. Disinvestment, investment. The terminologies, if you have understood, disinvestment means selling of anything, selling of any amount of ownership. But government of India says when government will sell minority stake. Understand the term. When government will sell minority stake means what? Government will sell certain ownership, certain percentage of ownership, but still will have control of management, which is at least 51%. So such a type of disinvestment, actually government will call this as a disinvestment policy. But technically speaking, disinvestment means selling securities, getting money. That can be done in multiple ways. I'll come to this. Okay, done. Can we go forward now? Renting houses. Shall I take this example of disinvestment? My dear, when you're renting house, you still have the ownership of the house. Correct or not? When you're renting a house, you still have the ownership of the house. You are not the owner if you are taking it on rent. If you're giving on the rent, you're simply monetizing. Understand the term. You're simply monetizing. Monetizing means, right, creating value for an asset. Right now, right, I hope you've heard of this policy. Right now, Government of India has National Monetization Policy. All of you heard of this? NMP. We'll discuss this in some time. National Monetization Policy. Under National Monetization Policy, government says, I have certain assets. I will not sell them. But I will create a value for these assets by renting them out. That is monetization. Creating value. Generating value for an asset is called as monetization. Okay. So let's go forward. Government organizations, three types. There are three types of government organizations. One is a departmental undertaking. Second one is public corporation. These are also referred to as statutory organizations. Statutory organizations. And the third one is government companies. Right? So one is departmental undertaking. Second one is a public corporation or statutory companies, statutory organizations. And the third one is government companies. Now, what do you mean by all the three types? What do you mean by all the three types? First one, let's start with the first one, departmental or governmental undertakings. These are companies which are run through ministries. These are enterprises. Enterprises means organizations which are run through ministries. That is, government will run this business through a ministry, through a department. For example, please do let me know whether this makes sense or not. Ministry of Railways. Railways is a business. Railways is an enterprise. So Government of India through the Ministry of Railways will operate railways in India. Which means, please understand, this enterprise that I'm talking about, that is railways, is part of government itself. It doesn't have any independent, right, let's say identity. There is no Indian Railways Company. No, it is run through Ministry of Railways. It is part and parcel of Government of India. Whatever funding has to be provided in the budget, they will allocate the funds. Whatever revenues are generated by railways are part of government revenues itself. There is no independent recognition for this enterprise. Such enterprises are called as departmental or ministerial undertaking. Example for this is railways is part of government in India. What about postal department? Right, post is also part of the government undertaking itself. So this is departmental undertaking. And what are the features? If you look at it very carefully, what are the features? Can I say finances of these are part of government finances only? Correct? Anybody has a doubt? Please do let me know. Finances of these are part of government finances. If you spend money on railways, it will be counted as government expenditure. If railways will earn money, it will be counted as government income. So there is no independence here. It is part of government finances only. Everything will be dealt from Consolidated Fund of India. What about operations? Who will control operations? Government ministers will control operations. Government employees will control operations of all of it. Right? So that is the concept of departmental undertaking. Departmental undertaking. Second one is public corporation or statutory organizations. What do you mean by public corporation or statutory organizations? Government will introduce a bill, pass the bill, this becomes an act. Under the act, I repeat, government will introduce a bill, bill becomes an act. Under the provisions of the act, this undertaking is set up, or this statutory organization is a setup. All of you understand the meaning of the term statutory? Let me know. All of you understand the meaning of the term statutory? So business and enterprise is set up according to the provisions under the law, under the act. Such organizations, such government organizations are called as statutory organizations. Now, third one, I'll come to the second one. I'll compare it. Just give me a minute. Third one, government companies. The government companies are established under Companies Act of 2013. Government companies, right, are those companies which are established under Companies Act of 2013. Any example of this? I've written two examples. One is a CIL, Coal India Limited. CIL is Coal India Limited. Second one is SAIL, Steel Authority of India Limited. So both of these, again, multiple examples are there. Don't by heart the whole list. Remember, simple examples, two to each. So Coal India Limited, Steel Authority of India Limited have been set up under the Companies Act of 2013. And whenever you set up under Companies Act of 2013, what does it mean? Government will have at least 51% ownership here. Please remember this. Government will have at least 51% ownership in these government companies. What does it mean? Please do let me know. Can you purchase from the stock market? Can you purchase share of Coal India Limited? Right? Start participating. Only then it will become easier for you to understand the differences between all the three. Can you purchase share of Steel Authority of India Limited, Coal India Limited from the stock market? Answer is yes. Some of you are not aware of it. Answer is yes. Why? These are present in the stock market. These are listed companies. Check it online. Right? If you have a doubt, go to Google, check it online. Right? So you can purchase the shares of these companies. You can sell the shares of these companies, which means government doesn't have complete ownership. The argument is government will have at least 51% ownership. Can government of India have 100% ownership? That is also possible. Can government of India have 100% ownership? That's also possible. But argument is simple. Government will set up this company under Companies Act of 2013 and will have at least 51% ownership in these government companies. Now, when you have government companies, can I simply say these will function more independently with very less interference of the government? Compare the first one and last one. Please compare the first one and last one. Can I say government companies can work much more independently with least interference of the government? I'm saying least interference because ultimately, if you're having 51% ownership, you have management control. You have management control. That means you will appoint people. You will appoint people to take care of these companies. But if anybody wants to be employed in the company, there is a selection process. Right? These companies, right? Although please understand, these companies, although they are owned by the government, the employees in the company are not purely government employees. Is the logic okay? Government is owning 51%, no doubt. But the employees are not purely government employees. Whereas, let's say, railways, Department of Post, can I say those are purely government employees? That is, they are directly on the payroll of Government of India. They are directly on the payroll of Government of India. Whereas here, if I'm an engineer in the Steel Authority of India Limited, if I'm a manager in the Coal India Limited, I'm an employee of Coal India Limited. I'm an employee of Steel Authority of India Limited. So Coal India Limited, Steel Authority of India Limited, they will have their own operations. They will sell goods or services in the market, generate revenues, and from the revenues, they will pay the salaries. So the salaries to these employees will not come directly from the government. These will come from the revenues generated by these companies. Okay, now come to the middle one. In middle one, what you will see is these are public corporations or statutory organizations. What is the importance of this? They understand this. These are owned by the government. These are not there in the stock market. For example, can you go to the stock market and purchase share of Food Corporation of India? Check it online. If you still have a doubt, check it online. Can you go to the stock market and purchase a share of Food Corporation of India? Absolutely no. Absolutely no. You cannot purchase a share. Why? The company is not listed in the market. It is not listed in the market. So you cannot purchase. So point number one, can I say public corporation? Whatever investment is there in the public corporation, 100% is owned by Government of India. Everything is okay with you, right? Anybody has a doubt? For example, Food Corporation of India, who has invested to set up FCI? Government has set up. Who owns 100% of FCI? Government owns. Can you purchase a share of FCI? Absolutely no. Whereas in case of government companies, can you purchase? Can you sell the shares of government companies? Of course, yes. These are generally listed in the market. So public corporations are established through a law, through a act. And that is the reason, please understand, initial investment, that is ownership of these public or statutory organizations, 100% is owned by government, right? Whatever functions are there for this public corporation, these are as per the provisions of the act. Whatever function has to happen, whatever are there, right? Let's say responsibilities, who is supposed to be appointed, what is, right, the qualification for all of it, everything will be written in the act. According to the act, the corporation will perform the functions. Corporation will have heads appointed. Corporations will have employees. Corporations will also generate revenues. But please understand, again, please understand this. The employees do not directly come under Government of India. That is, if I'm an employee of Food Corporation of India, Food Corporation of India is owned by the government, but I'm an employee of Food Corporation of India, not directly Government of India, right? So that is basically the idea of a public or statutory organization. Now, many of you will ask me, sir, why does government do this? This is so confusing. Why should I read all the three types? Why doesn't government have only one type? Don't you think, according to the requirement of, let's say, national security, social welfare, right, the expenditure requirements, etc., government can have organizations under all the three? Think of it. According to the government requirement, that is, let's say government wants this sector, this is strategically important for us. They want to promote growth also, they want to promote social welfare also, etc. So they would want to have very tight control. They would want to have very, very tight control on this, right, enterprise. So they might simply keep it under the departmental undertaking. Right? They might simply keep it under departmental undertaking. On the other side, government says, okay, I want to allow private sector to participate. I want this to compete with other companies also. I want to generate certain revenue by selling ownership. So can they go for government company structure? Think of it. In that case, can they go for government company structure where initial investment is done, but ownership is sold by the government? They might have 51%, remaining they will sell it in the market. The company will have more autonomy, more freedom to operate according to their requirement, etc. So that is the reason why we'll have different types of organizations. Okay. So these are the three examples. Please be very careful. Departmental undertaking, not understood. Departmental undertaking means this enterprise, it's a business in simple terms. This enterprise or business is a part of the government. That is, government will run this as a part of government activities itself. Right? Government will treat it like any other activity and will run the business. It is part of the government. The expenses, whatever are incurred, it is part of government expenditure. Whatever revenues are generated, they become part of government revenues itself. Right? That is a departmental undertaking and lot of interference because this is part of government. Government will appoint a minister for railways. Right? Government will appoint bureaucrats as secretaries for railways, etc. Can they be shifted? Can they be shifted from one ministry to another ministry? Can the minister be changed? Of course, yes. Lot of interference in case of departmental undertaking. Autonomy is not there, right? Government control is very high. Okay. Sir, we studied that the government control NABFID will be gradually be decreased. Then why will it become government company? My dear, right now 100% is owned by Government of India. Right now 100% is owned by Government of India. And NABFID was set up only after a bill was passed in the parliament. Hence, it will be part of government organizations, specifically statutory organizations. Okay. What is Mini Ratna, Maharatna? Again, don't worry. These are generally applicable to government companies. Right? Basically, there are three categorizations: Mini, Maha, and Navratna. Mini Ratna, Maharatna, and Navratna. And based on the size of the company, turnover of the company, etc., parameters are there. Classifications are done. Factual information, you will get it in any book. Okay. Done. So this is the basic classification of government organizations. Now let's look at disinvestment. Let's look at a disinvestment policy. Please understand this very carefully. Again, I'll repeat it. Disinvestment means you are selling an asset, you are selling a security, getting money. That is called as a disinvestment. But right now, Government of India says, whenever I sell security, I will still have management control, but earn money. I will call this policy minority as well as disinvestment. Minority disinvestment is the disinvestment policy of the government. Now, apart from minority, that is where government will sell and still have right majority and control the management. What are the other types? Strategic. We also have strategic. Strategic simply means where government ownership will fall, where government ownership will come down, and government will give away the management control. Right? Government ownership will fall down and government will give away the management control. Let's say an example where Government of India will bring its control, that is ownership in a company, to 49%. Government will bring down its ownership to 26%. Now please tell me, when government will bring it to 49 or 26%, don't you think it has lost management control over the company? So management, when the government will sell ownership, lose management control, that is called as strategic disinvestment. And the extreme type of strategic is complete privatization. Extreme means government will lose management control, government will sell ownership. That is complete privatization. Complete privatization. Where examples of complete privatization: Air India, right? Air India is a prime example of complete privatization. 100% has been sold by the government. Earlier, Maruti was owned by Government of India, completely privatized. Modern Foods was owned by Government of India, completely privatized. Right? So complete privatization means it's an extreme majority stake sale, where government will sell away 100% of the ownership. Government will not have any amount of ownership in a company. Cross holding, slightly technical, please listen to me very carefully. Cross holding. Now, right, understand this concept, slightly technical. Many of you will ask me, sir, this does not make sense, etc., etc. Let me start with an example. Let me start with a simple example. Imagine I have a car. Okay, imagine A is there, A has a car. And in the same house, B is also there, sibling, right? Or let's say brother, sister, whatever it is. A will sell car to B and collect money. Is this possible? Please do let me know. A will sell the car, collect money from B. Now, even after the sale of the car has happened, can I say the car is still there in the same house? The car is there still in the same house. Now, some of you will simply say, sir, when I give something to my sibling, I'll not collect money. My dear, you are very generous. I'm not talking about you. But a lot of the people, when they will transfer the ownership, they will sell the car, they will sell something like this, they will collect money. Nothing wrong, right? They want monetary value in return. That's it. So is this example okay? Again, don't remember this example. I want to make it easier for you. What is cross-selling? A has an asset. A will sell it to the asset to B, who are living in the same home, right? So B will pay money, get the asset. Now, even after the sale has happened, can I say car is still in the same home? Car has not been given away to somebody else. Car is there. Ownership of the car is still there in the same house. Now, come to cross selling. Come to cross selling. This is very, very famous. In private sector, it is very famous. Come to cross selling. What happens in a cross selling? Listen to me very carefully. Here is Government of India. Government of India, let's say, owns company A and company B. Is it okay? I'll repeat it. Let's say Government of India owns two companies, company A and company B, or organization A, organization B. Now, in cross selling, government will simply transfer the ownership of organization A to organization B. Is it okay? I'll repeat it. Right, in cross selling, government of India will transfer ownership of company A to company B. Now, can I simply say it also means B is purchasing company A? Correct? B is purchasing company A, and when B will purchase company A, B will have to pay money for it. So company B will pay money to Government of India. Company B will pay money to Government of India. Now look at the structure. Now please look at the structure. Earlier A was owned by Government of India, B was owned by Government of India. Now under cross selling, Government of India will sell a company owned by it to another company which is also owned by it. And many of you simply say, sir, why is the government doing it? What is the objective behind it? Even after cross selling, think of it and do let me know. Even after cross selling, can I simply say government will control or government will have ownership of A indirectly? Think of it. Government of India will have ownership of A, but not directly, through company B, because B is owned by Government of India. But what is the benefit? Why is government doing it? B, by purchasing A, when B will purchase A, it has to pay money to Government of India because they are purchasing an asset, they are purchasing a company. So government is selling ownership, but it will still have an indirect ownership, but it is collecting money. It is able to earn money through this. This is called as cross holding. This is called as cross holding. Very, very famous. Even private sector, lot of companies do this. Cross holding is very, very famous. Why? Let me give a very simple example. After the sale has happened, according to the law, who is the owner of company B? I'm saying, who is the owner of company A, not B? Who is the owner of company A? Can I simply say, according to the law, according to the documents, etc., it will be company B which is the owner. If somebody wants to file a case against a company A, whom will they approach now? If there is any problem with the financials of company A, whom will they approach now? Company B. Yes, does it make sense to you? Lot of businessmen actually do this. Lot of companies in private sector actually do this. Why? They do not want to have direct exposure. They do not want to have direct exposure, right? They do not want to have direct exposure to these companies. So they will basically transfer ownership into one more company which is owned by them only. Right? So I hope you understand why this cross holding has been done by government. Right? So cross holding is also an example where basically the government will sell one company owned by it to another company owned by government only. Any example, sir? I've given one example here. Right? There are two companies, both are owned by Government of India. Power Finance Corporation and Rural Electrification Corporation. REC is owned by Government of India. PFC was earlier owned by Government of India. They sold PFC to REC. Right? This kind of cross holding has been done by government already. And finally, ETF. Right? I hope you remember the concept of ETF. Please do let me know. Through ETF, can Government of India go for disinvestment? Let me know. Through ETF, Can government of India go for disinvestment? We have discussed what is ETF. Don't ask me, sir, explain ETF. You have not discussed ETF. Please go back to financial market. Financial market chapter, we discussed mutual funds. After that, we discussed exchange traded funds. We discussed exchange traded funds in the bond market as well as equity market. So very simple question to all of you. If government of India wants to sell 5% ownership in company A, B and C, can they do it through ETF route? Answer is yes, by the way. Can they do it through ETF route, exchange traded fund route? Answer is yes. And those who have a doubt now what is ETF, it simply means you're not revising. Your revision is not effective enough. Right? So please go back to financial market, look at what is ETF, you will understand it. So even ETF route can be used by the government to go for disinvestment policy. Can we go forward now? All of you okay? Can we go forward? Is employee in public corporation is it a government employee? My dear, if you are an employee of FCI, you are an employee of FCI. You are working in Ministry of Railways. Are you not employee of Government of India? Very simple question. If you are an employee in FCI, you are an employee of FCI, Food Corporation of India. But if you are an employee in Ministry of Railways, you are an employee of Government of India. There itself it is self-explanatory. Okay. Now, once the Government of India conducts a disinvestment, how they are going to use the funds? What is the benefit of conducting disinvestment? In what way funds can be utilized? Please remember this. Once the government company's disinvestment is conducted, whatever money is collected, it is transferred to National Investment Fund. Please remember this. It is transferred into National Investment Fund, NIF, National Investment Fund. Once the funds are there in the NIF, for what purposes they can be used? For what purposes they can be used? Right now, please remember the list. Please remember the list. UPC can ask you this list. Whenever the funds are generated, whenever government will be collecting the funds by conducting disinvestment, government can use this money to infuse capital in the banking sector. To infuse, the capital in the banking sector, that is public sector banks, government is the owner. They can invest money, they can put in capital in the public sector banks. After that, they can take this money, invest in the metro projects. They can use this money to invest in, let's say, rights issues. There's a term called as rights issues. Right, CPSE rights issues. What is the CPSE rights issues? Please understand this. Rights issue simply means these are, rights issues is a process wherein the company issues shares to the existing shareholders. I'll repeat the statement, right? I'll repeat the statement. Please listen carefully. What do you mean by rights issue? Whenever a company will conduct a rights issue, it simply means there are existing shareholders. To the existing shareholders, the company will issue shares. This is called as a rights issue. Right? So in CPSEs, Central Public Sector Enterprises. CPSE means a Central Public Sector Enterprises. They can go for a rights issue, subscription of a rights issue in the CPSEs. Okay. Next one, recapitalization in public sector banks. They can invest money in regional rural banks or NABARD, right? So they can also invest in railways capital expenditure. They can invest in atomic energy companies owned by Government of India. Atomic energy companies. For example, Bharatiya Nabikiya Vidyut Nigam Limited, Uranium Corporation of India Limited. These are atomic energy companies owned by Government of India. They can invest in these companies. So these are the only ways through which funds from the National Investment Fund can be utilized by the government. For example, if UPC will ask you the proceeds of disinvestment, can be used to launch social welfare programs. Is it correct? Please do let me know. Can the proceeds of disinvestment, can they be used to launch social welfare programs? Can they be used to provide a PM Kisan subsidy? Can they be used? And interestingly, some of you are saying yes. My goodness. What are you listening to? What are you listening to? Listen carefully. Can they be used to provide subsidies for companies in India? Answer is no. Answer is strictly no. Why? Please listen carefully. These are the only purposes for which funds from NIF can be used. Right? These are the only purposes. Beyond this, you are not allowed to use it for other purposes. Is it okay? Right? So these are the things. These are certain very important points regarding NIF. And one more very important point. NIF is not part of consolidated fund of Government of India. Please remember this. NIF is not a part of consolidated fund of India. It is kept outside consolidated fund. Right? Meaning what? If Government of India wants to withdraw any amount from the NIF, do they require approval of Parliament? Think of it. If Government of India wants to withdraw any funds from right the NIF, do they require approval of the Parliament? Absolutely no. Absolutely no. They don't require the approval. Why? This is not part of consolidated fund of India. Right? This is not a part of consolidated fund of India. So these are certain very important points regarding disinvestment policy. Next, the recent disinvestment policy. The most recent disinvestment policy. Government of India now says we will introduce a new disinvestment policy wherein all the industries, we will divide them into two parts. All the industries will divide them into two parts. That is the industries where government is present, we will divide them into two parts. One is called as strategic. One is called as strategic and the second one is called as non-strategic. Sir, on what basis will they divide them into strategic and non-strategic? Government says we will look at certain parameters. For example, is this sector important for national security? Is this sector important for promotion of social welfare? Is this industry very important for me to promote growth in India, etc.? So based on various parameters, I will divide these industries into the strategic ones as well as non-strategic ones. And whenever you have classified any sector as a strategic sector, I'll repeat it. Whenever you have classified anything as a strategic sector, government says in these sectors, maximum government will have 4 companies. I'll repeat the statement. If you have classified one sector as a strategic one, then Government of India maximum will have 4 companies in the sector. Sir, what if there are more than 4? Go for consolidation. Go for mergers. Can I give you one example? You tell me automatically, does it make sense or not? Banking sector. Please have a look at the term banking sector here. Please tell me what has been the policy of Government of India towards public sector banks. Let me know what has been the policy of Government of India towards public sector banks. Is Government of India opening more and more public sector banks, or they are merging public sector banks in order to reduce the number of PSBs? Think of it. Please think of it. Right? Government of India right now, if you see, Government of India is merging these public sector banks so that the number of public sector banks in India will come down. Correct? All of you okay with this? So argument is simple here. In strategic sector, whatever sectors are covered, examples are here. Please have a look at it. Government says maximum we will have 4. In banking sector, maximum we will reduce it to 4. Right? In a defense sector, will maximum reduce it to 4. In atomic energy, we will have maximum 4. So any of these sectors, government will have maximum 4 only. If there are more than 4, we will consolidate, we will merge them. And anything that is non-strategic, any sector, and this is very interesting, let me ask you, can you think of any example which can be non-strategic? I have not written it, but let me know. Can you think, after let's say 15 classes of Indian economy, can you think of anything which can you give it as an example of non-strategic? Let me see. Best example, agriculture. Best example, agriculture, right? So again, in agriculture, government presence is already minimal. Think of it. Just think of it. Very, very common example. Textile sector, right? Agriculture, textile sector, right? So I hope you understand. Multiple examples were there. Don't prepare the whole list. Remember one or two examples more than sufficient. So in non-strategic sector, if government is already present, in non-strategic sector, what will happen? Government says, we will simply try to privatize them. I will not have even a single company in non-strategic sector. Right? I'll repeat the statement. I will not have even a single company in the non-strategic sector. If it is there, we will privatize it. If I cannot privatize it, I will close it. Right? So that is basically non-strategic sector. Non-strategic sector. This is the latest disinvestment policy of Government of India. Please remember this. Please remember this. Questions can be asked by UPSC in the preliminary examination. Now, why Government of India has these kind of policies? Why does Government of India go for privatization, disinvestment, etc.? I'll give you the comparison. I'll give you critical evaluation. Please listen to me carefully. What are the benefits of the disinvestment policy? What are the benefits? And what are the concerns? What are the benefits as well as what are the concerns? Point number one, benefits. Can I say by conducting disinvestment or let's say privatization, government will be able to raise money? Correct? Anybody has a problem? By conducting disinvestments or by privatization, government will be able to raise money, receipts, capital receipts. That's very important. Point number one. Point number two. Point number two. Can I say if Government of India is privatizing, if Government of India is selling assets in the market, government interference will be very less. It will lead to more competition in the market. It will lead to higher competition in the market. If government itself is not present, everything is private sector, competition will be fostered, competition will be promoted. All of you okay with this? Third one, third reason, Government of India says it is not the business of the government to be in business. I'll repeat the statement. Please listen to me carefully. Government of India says it is not the business of the government to be in business. That is basically government says, right, no, I will not be there in the business because it is supposed to be done by the companies. I am not the right person. Because just think of it. If you remember the government organizations, right, on one side we had a departmental undertaking, on the other side we had government companies. According to you, where do you think decision making is much more efficient, decision making is much faster according to the market changes? I'll repeat my question again. Right? You have seen government organizations. On one side, you had departmental undertakings. On the extreme other side, exactly opposite, you had government companies. According to you, where do you think the decision making will be much faster, much efficient according to the changes that are taking place in the market? Don't you think that will be much more efficient, much faster, etc. under government companies? Under government companies, again, some of you saying private sector. My dear, I'm comparing between government company and government undertaking. I was talking about these two. Of course, yes, if you talk about government companies and private sector is much more efficient, much more faster. So argument of government is, if I have ownership, right, I will have to appoint people, right? If they are incurring losses, I will have to pay money for that also, right, etc. So why not simply privatize? Why not simply privatize? Because private sector will utilize efficiency or resources much more efficiently. Private sector runs behind profits. Government always cannot run behind profits. So the third argument is, it is not the business of the government. It is not the business of the government to run businesses. And fourth one, is there a possibility, and it has happened by the way, although I'm saying possibility, is there a possibility that government will use taxpayers' money to provide assistance to loss-making companies? Yes or no? Is there a possibility that the taxpayers money is spent on loss making companies, Of course, yes. Right, it has happened. Example, Air India, Maruti company, etc. Now that is the reason government says we'll go for privatization, we'll go for disinvestment. What are the concerns then? What are the concerns? Point number one, please do let me know. Can government of India till perpetuity keep on selling owned assets? Don't you think at one point of time, government will run out of companies that they want to sell in the market? Yes? Yes or no? Please do participate. At one point of time, government will run out of companies that they want to sell in the market. Right? There may not be any more companies. Government may not have any more companies to sell in the market. So what will you do at that point of time to raise money? Possibility, right? So running out of companies, no more companies to sell. Second concern, if government will sell all these companies and everything is done by the private sector, what about the affordability of services? What about affordability of services? For example, let's say hypothetically, if railways is completely privatized, think of it. If railways is completely privatized, do you think a private sector company will be worried about social welfare? Correct? Do you think the private sector company will be worried about social welfare? No, private sector will be worried about profits. And if they are running behind profits, they will increase the price of the services, which might make this affordable for many people in India. So social welfare objective will be affected. Third one, if companies owned by government will be privatized, can there be exploitation of workers? Think of it. Can there be abuse of the workers? Abuse in the sense, productivity expectations are very high, payment of salaries is very low. Right? What about welfare of workers? What about welfare of workers? Right? What about welfare of the workers? That also will be affected. Fourth one, timing of the sales. Timing of sales. That is also very important. Timing of sales. That is, imagine government wants to sell certain shares or wants to sell company. What if there is a recession in the economy? What if nobody wants to buy this company, etc.? Don't you think in that case government will be forced to sell this company at very, very low prices? Correct? Yes or no? Please do participate then. Right? If there is no demand for the shares of this company, because lot of investment has already been done in the market, right? The private sector is not much interested in buying this company, but government of India wants to sell it. So when the demand is very less, government will have to be satisfied to collect very less money by selling ownership, by selling shares in the market. So revenue collection can be very, very less if the timing of the sale is not correct. Right? So these are some of the concerns associated with the concept of privatization. And finally, one more concern. Right? The opposition parties, whichever party is there, don't worry. The opposition parties will simply say, whenever government will go for privatization, it is equivalent to selling family silver. I'll repeat the statement. Whenever government will go for privatization, it is equivalent. It is equal to selling family jewels. And right, and you tell me, when do you think family will sell the family jewels? Don't you think a household will sell the family jewels when there is a dire requirement of money? When other sources of money have been closed for them, only in that situation they will sell the family jewels. Right? They don't have any money now. It's very, very difficult for them to sustain expenditure. That is when they will sell the family jewels. So the opposition parties will say that criticism, whenever government will go for privatization, right, it simply means government doesn't have money. They do not have sufficient money to take care of their own expenses. That is the reason they are selling the jewels now. Right? So that is the argument. That is the argument regarding privatization. Done. So these are certain things I wanted to discuss regarding the idea of privatization. Next, I'll add certain more current affairs, NIP and NMP. We'll discuss NIP as well as NMP, but after the break. Now, before the break, if there are any concerns, any issues regarding what we have discussed today, please do let me know. Just a second. Okay, could not understand new disinvestment policy. Arey Baba. Government is present in different sectors. Divide the different sectors into two parts: strategic, non strategic. In non strategic, if you have a company, sell it. You will not have any ownership of company non strategic. In strategic, maximum 4 companies. That's it. Okay, ports and airport management comes under which one of them? Right? Which what question are you asking? I don't know. LIC is also government company. Yes, LIC has been brought under the stock market now. It is government company. What is the benefit of cross holding? Government does not have any exposure to this company. Government does not have a direct exposure. Government will still have indirect ownership. Government, by selling this company, will be able to collect money. Is core companies under the strategic policy? What do you mean by core companies here? Let me know what do you mean by core companies. What is rights issues? I'll repeat it again. Listen carefully. No, please listen carefully. It's like going 3 steps forward and jumping 2 steps back. Effective is only 1 step. Rights issues means a company is selling shares, new shares, of course, to the existing shareholders. To the existing owners, they are selling shares. That is called as a rights issue. Does the government decision to privatize everything necessarily mean they support capitalism? No, it doesn't necessarily mean they support capitalism. Okay. Couldn't understand difference between department undertaking and public organization. Department undertaking is part of government. Public organization or statutory organization means government will pass a bill, introduce an act, under the provision of the act, set up statutory organization. Okay. Sir, but defense and atomic sector was meant to be entirely under government control. Why disinvestment? My dear, over a period of time, don't you think government of India cannot have all the investment that is required in the defense sector in India? Think of it. Think of it. Please think of it and do let me know. Do you think government of India will be able to spend equivalent amount of money in defense sector compared to China, compared to USA? No, it's not possible. It's not at all possible. Why? Their GDPs are very, very large compared to India. So what government of India says, I will allow private sector entry. As much as possible, I'll allow private sector entry so that R&D investment increases, production also increases. Okay. Okay, so let me stop now. Let me take a break. Time is 8:13. We'll restart the discussion at 8:28. We'll restart the discussion at 8:28. Take a break. Okay, welcome back. Am I audible? Can we start now? Let me know, am I audible? Okay, let's start. So the next concept I want to discuss, again, those who are confused, we are still discussing LPG. We have not gone out of LPG. We are still discussing LPG. I just want to add more and more current affairs so that you don't have to study it somewhere. You don't have to read it apart like this. So we have discussed a liberalization, done. We are discussing privatization. In privatization, disinvestment policy, why disinvestment is done, what are the benefits, what are the concerns, etc., etc. And in addition to these, I want to discuss two current affair concepts. Two current affairs concepts. One is NIP and the second one is NMP. NIP is National Infrastructure Pipeline. Second one is NMP, National Monetization Pipeline. And before I start NIP as well as NMP, the current affairs articles, right? Which articles I want you people to read from today's Hindu newspaper. First one, there is an article on tourism between India and Maldives. Hindu newspaper, only Hindu I am talking about. There's an article about tourism between India and Maldives. Central page article, please read that. Second and third, I want you to read editorials. I want you people to read both the editorials, right? Both of the editorials, please read it. The first editorial in Hindu newspaper is about growth in India. Very recently, there was a growth estimate. It's an estimate, advanced estimate of 7.3% given by NSO. Whether we will achieve it or not, you will have to wait and see. But it is just an estimate. Please remember that. So there is an editorial on growth. Growth sans demand. The headline is growth sans demand, meaning what? We are achieving growth, but the demand is very less. Demand is very less because please understand, think of it. Please think of it, right? These should not be very difficult for you. When we measure GDP using expenditure method, is it possible that your GDP will increase with very high government expenditure? Do let me know. Right? Very simple. UPC can ask you these kind of questions. Can expenditure of government of India increase, and as a result of which GDP also increase? Because if you remember the formula for GDP, what is the formula for GDP through expenditure method? C plus I plus G plus X minus M. Correct? C plus I plus G plus within the bracket X minus M. C is consumption expenditure, that is done by us. They will use a technical term, private final consumption expenditure. Private final consumption expenditure. Please understand, consumption expenditure, PFC, private final consumption expenditure. And government, they will say private final government expenditure, PFGE, right? Private final government expenditure. So now let me know, is it possible that India's GDP growth rate will be 7.3% because of higher government expenditure? But please again understand the next point also. Is this kind of a growth sustainable? Let me know. Is this kind of a growth sustainable? Can you sustain a higher GDP growth with higher G component here? Higher G component? Absolutely no. You cannot sustain that. Why? Till what extent you want the government only to keep on spending? For how many years you want the government to keep on spending and drive the growth? It should not be government expenditure led growth. It should be consumption led growth. Does it make sense to you? What is sustainable? Consumption led growth is sustainable. Government expenditure led growth is not sustainable. And that is exactly what the article is telling you. That is exactly what the article is telling you. It says the consumption expenditure has fallen in India. Fallen in the sense, compared to last year's growth, it is lower. It is not growing at a very faster pace. Services sector such as tourism, such as let's say aviation, such as the real estate, etc., they are not growing very fast. The government expenditure is growing very fast, and that is contributing to 7.3% growth rate. So read that article. Interesting. Do not buy hard data, because from one year to next year, from one quarter to another quarter, data will keep on changing. This is very important. And as such, out of total expenditure in India, generally, out of total expenditure in India, when we calculate GDP, the C component is very, very high. The C component, that is private final consumption expenditure, generally is more than 60% in India. But the article says it has fallen into one of the lowest in the decades. And that is a cause of concern. That's a cause of concern. Why? It means consumption expenditure is not increasing at a very faster pace. That's a cause of concern. Okay, so editorial one is growth. Second editorial is regarding investment. Right, regarding investment, that is very recently, this was there in the newspapers as well, multiple news also. Tamil Nadu government has conducted an investment drive where a lot of investments from private sector, domestic as well as foreign, have been right promised to be invested, promised MOU, memorandum of understanding have been signed. Please read that article. Why? Next week, or maybe at the end of this week only, maybe on Friday, we'll take one chapter called as FDI, investment model, where we'll discuss FDI. There was one question asked by UPS in the mains earlier. There was one question asked. I'll show that to you. The question said, although the signing of agreements is very, very high, but actual investment is lower in India. Why? I hope you understand. And that was exactly what is being discussed in that editorial article. Read it. Again, I'm telling you, read it. Lot of information you'll get from these kind of articles. So first one is on tourism. Second one, I want you people to read both of these articles on editorials. Fourth one, I want you to read, let's say business page. There is an article on textiles. Please read that. And fifth one, at the bottom part of the business page, there is one article regarding Government of India setting up a panel, a task force. A panel has been set up to identify certain issues which are plaguing India's exports. How can we address it? There is a panel which has been set up. Please read that. So these are the very important articles, the most important articles I want you people to read from today's Hindu newspaper. Now, some of you are saying, sir, can you give the same for this article, that article, or this newspaper, that newspaper, etc.? My dear, early morning, we don't get all the newspapers. For example, if you know this, Indian Express digital version is available only after 6 o'clock. At around 6:02 to 6:03, the digital version is available. And 6 o'clock, I'm there in the classroom. So I cannot read it before that and tell you what are the important articles. So it is beyond me. I cannot do dual work like this. 5 articles and sixth article, bond index, Bloomberg bond index, right? Indian bonds, right? There is a concept, right? There is a scheme called as a voluntary retention route, fully accessible route. We are yet to discuss, but please read this particular bond index, Bloomberg bond index, right? Please read that article. Later, when we discuss fully accessible route under the another chapter, you will understand what is the meaning of that. Okay, done. So these are the 6 articles. Again, this is for your benefit. Do not behave as if by reading these articles you are doing a favor on me. Absolutely no. I am doing this for your benefit. If some of the students keep on saying, why do you tell us to read, etc. If you find this to be difficult, let me know. I'll stop giving you the list of the articles. It's not difficult for me. I will stop giving you the list of the articles. So please do yourself a favor, not me, yourself a favor, read these articles. So the next concept I want to discuss is NIP, National Infrastructure Pipeline. Now under NIP, logic is simple. Government of India has identified more than 9,000 projects. Government of India has identified more than 9,000 infrastructure projects. In these 9,000 infrastructure projects, the total investment requirement will be more than 111 lakh crore rupees. Now, government says this more than 111 lakh crore rupees will be invested by the state government, by the central government, as well as the private sector. That is, out of this 111 lakh crore plus, private sector will be spending around 21% of the total investment. The government will be spending around 39% of the total investment, and the state governments will be spending 40% of the investment. And which all sectors have been identified? Infrastructure from which sectors have been identified? You do not have to remember all the 9,000 projects, but please remember the top 3 most, and the same will be useful other way, in some other place also. One is railways, second one is roadways, third one is energy infrastructure. Please remember only 3, more than sufficient. One is railways, second one is roadways, third one is power infrastructure. So these three account for a large amount by value of infrastructure projects which are covered under National Infrastructure Pipeline. Now, why is Government of India promoting it? What is the logic behind the National Infrastructure Pipeline? Point number one, all of you will agree when I say infrastructure by default will have multiplier effect. Please participate and do let me know. Infrastructure by default will have multiplier effect. That is point number one. Infrastructure development will help India to become a $5 trillion economy, a $10 trillion economy, etc. It will help us in achieving higher GDP. Point number three, if you promote the development of more and more infrastructure, and if that happens, the quality, the standard of living automatically will improve. For example, now you can reach, right, let's say healthcare facilities much faster. You can move goods much more faster. Consumption of fuels will come down. Emission of the vehicles will also start coming down, etc. Quality, standard of living will improve. Right? So develop world-class infrastructure. Higher capital expenditure always will lead to a multiplier effect. It will attract investments not only from the domestic market but also from the international market, and finally improve the quality of life of the citizens. So these are some of the reasons as to why government is promoting development of infrastructure under NIP, National Infrastructure Pipeline. Under this, total investment proposed by the government is 111 lakh crore rupees. Again, this is proposed. By the time you write the exams, there might be a change. It could increase by a small number. Next year, it could further change by a small number. Because remember this, initially when it was proposed, government identified around 6,800 projects. Government had identified only around 6,800 projects. Now, when we are implementing it, the recent economic survey says we have identified more than 9,000 projects under NIP. It will be funded by central government, state government, as well as private sector. This will be implemented for a duration of 2020 to 2025. And finally, the sectors which are covered under this, the most important sectors are power, railways, road sector, etc. Apart from this, multiple sectors are covered. Remember the three most important ones, easier ones, right? It will be easier for you. Okay, so this is a concept of National Infrastructure Pipeline. Now there is one more, National Monetization Pipeline, NMP, National Monetization Pipeline. Please understand the concept of monetization here. Monetization simply means you are deriving value for an asset. You are creating value for an asset. For example, let's say there is a infrastructure that has been created by the government, a roadways, a office building, right, or an airport, or a ground, etc., or a stadium. Now, Government of India will simply lease it out to a private sector company and will earn money from the private sector company's usage of the infrastructure. So can I simply say, by monetizing, what we are doing? We are simply leasing out the asset. We are generating value from an asset. That is basically the idea for monetization. And remember the next point as well. Under monetization, we do not sell asset. I'll repeat the statement. Under monetization program, government is not planning of selling asset. Government is planning of leasing out, renting out the asset to private sector. That is a concept of National Monetization Pipeline. Now, why is the government doing it? Very simple. Government wants a lot of money to develop infrastructure, other infrastructure projects. Now, government says there are various infrastructure projects which are not utilized by me, which are underutilized by me. I'm not utilizing it, or I'm underutilizing it. So what I can do is, I can simply lease it out to private sector. Private sector will use it for, let's say, 30 years and will give me money for using the resources. So I'm monetizing the asset. I'm generating value as well. Okay, right? So proposal is simple. Under this, multiple projects from various sectors. Which sectors? Again, remember three easier ones: railway, road, and power. Railway, road and power, right? Same three. In NIP also, in NMP also, easier to remember. So multiple sectors, infrastructure projects which are developed by the government, which are owned by the government and not utilized or underutilized have been identified. We will lease it out. We will lease it out in the next couple of years. The lease period will be for 30 years. And because private sector will take this project, they will give certain amount of money to government. Government will use this money for development of infrastructure. Right? So lease period is for 30 years, mainly from railways, road and power sector. Now there's a technical term here. I'll explain it. Please listen to me very carefully. There's a term called as a brownfield project and greenfield project. Listen very carefully. There is a term called as brownfield project and greenfield project. Greenfield project, brownfield and greenfield. What is the basic difference between a brownfield and greenfield? In greenfield, the project has to be constructed. The project has to be started from the scratch. The project has to be started from the scratch. Now, what do you mean by from the scratch? From the scratch simply means from the beginning. The project has to be constructed from beginning. Whereas in brownfield, the infrastructure is already present. Infrastructure is already present. Now, existing infrastructure is used. I'll give a simple example. Listen to me very carefully. Imagine one airport is already there. Government will ask you to operate airport. Is it okay? I'll repeat the example here. The airport is already there. Government will ask you to operate airport for 30 years. Can I call it as a brownfield project? Correct? Can I call this as a brownfield project? On the other side, government wants you to construct a road. Government wants you to construct a road. Road is not there. Government wants you to construct a road. Can I call it as a greenfield project? Anybody has a difficulty? Greenfield means the project has to start from the beginning, from the scratch. Whereas brownfield means infrastructure is already there. We will use existing infrastructure. Brownfield, greenfield. Now let me know, does it make sense to you when I say under the national monetization pipeline, only brownfield projects will be covered? Let me see. Under national monetization pipeline, is it okay if I say only brownfield projects will be covered? Because project is already there, infrastructure is already there. Government will lease it out. Okay, so that is national monetization pipeline. Now let me do a critical evaluation here. Critical evaluation, what are the benefits of this model and what are the concerns related to this model? Benefits. Point number one, government will be able to raise a lot of money by leasing out unutilized or underutilized infrastructure projects. Is it okay? Government is not able to use the project. They will lease it out. They will earn money. That is benefit for the government. Point number two, if government is not utilizing this infrastructure correctly, at least private sector will utilize the resources much more efficiently. It could be road, it could be airport, it could be port, it could be a power production facility, whatever it is. Government is not able to utilize the resources correctly. That is the reason there is no utilization or underutilization. Now, private sector will utilize the resources much more efficiently. Now, when private sector will start providing services, don't you think quality of services will improve? Quality of the services that they will provide to customers will improve. So as customers, we are going to get the benefit. Right? Consumers will be benefiting. Government will be raising funds. Right? It will unlock the value of the asset which was not utilized earlier by the government. And finally, if this monetization model will work at the central government level, we can use the same model even at the state government level, increase the revenue potential for the state governments. These are some of the advantages which are associated with the model of national monetization pipeline. But having said so, what are the concerns related to this? What are the problems related to this model? Point number one, if you allocate asset to private sector for 30 years, what was the process followed? Was the process transparent? Is there a concern of corruption there? Is there a concern that all these assets are being given to only one private sector company, which will make it monopoly in the market? That is a cause of concern. Correct? That is a cause of concern. Again, please understand, I'm not giving any allegations here. In fact, there is a current affairs topic. 6 of the airports, when these were monetized, the 6 of the airports, Adani took over the 6 of airports. Again, whether this is correct or not, that is not your concern. You don't have to write this in the exam. But is there a cause of concern that only one private sector company is getting a lot of powers in Indian economy? We are promoting only one private sector company which might become a monopoly over a period of time. Again, it is a cause of concern. Neither do you know, nor do I know what is the actual situation. So don't write it in the exam, but definitely say, right, what is the process followed? Is it transparent or not? That is a cause of concern. Second one, what about the security of the workers? If government is operating an asset, now this asset will be taken on lease by the private sector. Don't you think in order to increase their profit, in order to make it much more efficient, they may lay off some of the workers? They may simply remove some of the workers. They'll simply say, I don't require so many people. Let's remove some of the people. Right? So what about the security of the jobs of workers who are already employed by this asset? Next one, if private sector is going to spend money and take one infrastructure on lease, it means this amount will not be spent on other projects by the private sector. I'll repeat the statement. Understand this. And Government of India says with monetization, private sector investment will increase. This is a statement of government. But many experts say, imagine I'm a private sector company. I wanted to spend, let's say, 1 crore rupee and invest in one asset, create or invest in one asset. Now, because one asset is being leased to me by the government, I'll take the same 1 crore rupee, give it to government. So don't you think rather than investing here, I've invested in monetization of the asset. So overall infrastructure investment may not change, right? That is the argument. Next one, when private sector will start providing services, what if the cost of the services is increased? Will it not make unaffordable for large population in India? Will the services not become very costly for consumers in India? Of course, yes. Right? And finally, once this asset is taken on lease basis for 30 years by the private sector company and the lease is over, the asset is returned to the government, what will be the shape or form of the asset when returned? Now, many of you will say, sir, what do you mean by shape or form of the asset? I'll give a very simple example. A lot of you either will be living on rent or would have given your house on a rent. Correct? Lot of you, not everyone. Lot of you either you will be living on rental basis or you would have given your house on rental basis. My dear, when the rent period is over, when the rent period of 2 years, 3 years, 4 years is over and the house is vacated, can you imagine what will be the shape or form of the house when the keys are handed over to the owner? Think of it. What will be the shape or form of the house when the keys are handed over to the owner? Right? A fan will not be working. Taps will be broken. Windows will not have any glasses. Doors will not open. Certain cupboards will not have doors only. Right? I hope you understand. So apply the same logic to infrastructure which is leased out by the government. Right? The quality of the infrastructure could have deteriorated very, very sharply after 30 years when the asset is handed over back to the government. That is a cause of concern. So one is a NIP, second one is NMP. Both are current affairs associated with government policies itself. So one, liberalization is over. Second, privatization is over. Third one I want to discuss is globalization. Third one is globalization. Now, what is this idea for globalization? Globalization is defined as increase in the flow of goods, services, capital, people, ideas, etc. across the borders. The simplest definition, globalization simply means across the border, that is India and the rest of the world, it will lead to increase in the flow of people, capital, investments, right? Or let's say labor, etc. Goods, services. This is called as a globalization, right? So have a look at this. Globalization is possible because trade barriers have been reduced over a period of time, right? A flow of technology has increased from one country to another country. Financial capital, that is investments, have kept on flowing into India as well as outside India. Human capital has been flowing into India as well as outside India. Movement of goods as well as services, right? All these are the indicators that government of India is following a policy to promote globalization. Now if you ask me, sir, how are we achieving globalization, can I say liberalization policy, privatization policies have played a very important role in promoting globalization in India. Please think of it. Liberalization policies, privatization policies to a very great extent have helped India move towards globalization. For example, industrial policy. Earlier, foreign companies were very much restricted in terms of entry into India. Now, foreign companies are allowed because of liberalization policy. Because government is selling companies, privatization, foreign companies can come purchase these government owned companies. So liberalization, privatization policies have to a very great extent helped the government of India to promote globalization. So some of the reforms that have been undertaken by the government are, government is promoting foreign institutional investors or foreign portfolio investments in India. That is basically investments into the stock market, bond market. Government is also promoting FDI investment in India. Again, the best example that I can quote, not government of India, but think of, right, let's say Tamil Nadu government. Please think of Tamil Nadu government. They have attracted more than 6 lakh crore rupee worth of investments. They have attracted more than 6 lakh crore rupee, not a small amount. 6 lakh crore rupee investments. But again, will all the investments materialize? Materialize means I will promise that I will sign an agreement and promise that I will invest, let's say, 1 lakh crore rupee. That doesn't necessarily mean I will actually invest 1 lakh crore rupee. That will depend on so many other factors. For example, please think of it. Imagine I will sign an agreement. You're a chief minister, right? Imagine, right? So almost 9 o'clock. Congratulations, you're a chief minister now. I will sign a memorandum with you saying that I will invest 1 lakh crore rupee to set up a manufacturing facility. But let me know if it is very difficult to acquire land in your state. If it is very difficult to acquire land in your state and your state does not have skilled labor, will I actually go through the investment? Think of it. Will the company actually go through the promise and invest money in your state? Absolutely no. They will not invest it. They will not invest it. Initially, they will promise that, okay, I will invest this much, this much. They will sign the memorandum. But later they will realize, okay, land acquisition, very, very difficult in the state. Right? Labor, no skilled labor is available. Raw material supply, very difficult to get access to raw material. So the investor will say, sorry, I will not invest money in your state. Has it happened in the past? Yes. And can it happen in the future also? Of course, yes. The Tamil Nadu government says we will create so many jobs, right? We will be able to attract so much investment. We will be able to make our economy worth $1 trillion by 2030. May or may not happen. Most likely it will not happen. Most likely it will not happen. Okay. So that is the reason. In fact, please understand. Yesterday, I don't know how many of you have seen this. Yesterday, the High Speed Rail Corporation. Do you know about this company? National High Speed Rail Corporation Limited. NHSRCL. How many have heard of this? National High Speed Rail Corporation Limited. right? This is basically responsible for implementation of bullet train project in India. This is responsible for the implementation of bullet train project in India. Bullet train project in India. Day before yesterday, they announced that, this is interesting. Day before yesterday, they announced that all the land that they needed for development of bullet train project, they have acquired. I'll repeat the statement. This article did not appear in Hindu. It did not appear in Hindu. Neither in Hindu yesterday or today. It has not appeared. But in Mint newspaper yesterday, this was mentioned. The bullet train project, it's a project, infrastructure project. And for the implementation of this, government has set up an authority, National High Speed Rail Corporation of India Limited. This authority, day for yesterday, published in X, formerly Twitter, X, stated that 100% of land that is required for the development of the project, we have acquired now. And interestingly, when the project was announced by the government, we were supposed to start operations of the project by 2023. Do you understand what I'm trying to convince you people of? Right? Government of India said 2023, we will operate bullet train. We'll start operations of the bullet train. And the authority says in 2024, whatever land is required, we have acquired now. Right? So I hope you understand when we keep on saying, or when you read in the newspapers, land acquisition in India is very, very difficult. Very, very difficult. It's not easy. I'll give you one more current affairs example. Very recently, it was there in the newspaper. The Tata Nano project in West Bengal. Have you come across that? Right? You might simply say it's very old article, sir. The Tata Nano project from West Bengal was shifted many, many years ago, etc. My dear, Tata Nano project was proposed to be implemented in one of the areas, Singur in West Bengal. There was opposition to land acquisition. And from there, it was later shifted to Gujarat. So Tata company filed a complaint, filed a litigation. And very recently, the tribunal has issued an order saying that West Bengal government has to pay so much amount of compensation to Tata company. It was there couple of months ago. It was there in the newspaper. So please be very, very careful. Land acquisition is not at all easy in India. Very, very difficult in India. So anyways, come back to the discussion here. Foreign investment reforms such as FDI and FPI, we have been able to attract a lot of investments. Exchange rate reforms have been allowed. So the exchange rate reforms has helped us to make capital account partially convertible and current account fully convertible. That has helped us in attracting imports, exports, etc. Controls imposed by the government under various industrial policies have been removed. Right? They have been removed. Right? So these are some of the policies, some of the reforms that have been undertaken by the government to promote globalization in India. Now, because of globalization, what are the benefits? What are the benefits and what are the concerns regarding globalization? Now, before I start explaining this, please understand there are two names, right? There are two terminologies which are used. Let's say from USA, a company from USA will invest money in India. A company from USA, a USA company will invest money in India. So I will call USA as a home country. I will call USA as a home country and I'll call India as a host country. Is it okay? Is it okay with all of you? A USA company will invest in India. So I will call USA as a home country and I'll call India as a host country. Now listen very carefully. What are the benefits of globalization? Point number one, with higher globalization, it will give us more access to imports, exports, technology. It will give us more access to import new types of machineries or export machineries. We'll be able to get access to labor pool also. We'll be able to get access to labor pool. Either the skilled labor will come into India or go out of India. Okay. It will also lead to higher investment as well as growth. Right? If India will promote globalization, does it make sense to you? India will be able to experience a higher flow of investments as well as higher contribution to growth. Next, it will lead to lot of employment generation in host country. Please look at this example and listen to me carefully. It will lead to employment generation in host country. That is a USA company instead of, I repeat, a USA company instead of investing in USA or by closing operations in USA will simply set up a manufacturing facility in India. So can I say in host country employment will be generated, in home country employment will be lost. Remember this. In host country employment is generated and there can be loss of jobs in the home country. Right? So employment generation is done in the host country. Increase the standard of living, more jobs, more salaries, more per capita income, standard of living will improve. And it will also promote more and more access to technology as well as innovation. These are some of the benefits of promoting globalization. But having said so, are there any concerns? Are there any problems with the model of globalization? Point number one, with more and more globalization, there is a potential loss of jobs in the home country. That is point number one. Point number two, if these multinational companies will invest in India, is there a scope of tax avoidance and tax evasion done by these companies? Let me know. Is there a scope of tax avoidance and tax evasion which are done by these multinational enterprises? Of course, yes. Huge scope is there. Can there be exploitation of the workers? Can there be exploitation of the workers? Yes. There is a lot of exploitation of the workers, especially when these countries or when these companies invest in poor countries. Right? When these countries will invest in very, very poor countries, lot of exploitation of the workers. Exploitation in the terms of no proper facilities when they are working. For example, right, drinking water facility, right, access to air in the sense is AC working or not, do they have fans in the factories, etc., right, access to healthcare facilities. So no proper facilities are provided. For example, how many of you have heard of these global textile majors, global textile companies, that is branded companies exploiting labor in Bangladesh? Think of it. This is very often cited in the newspaper. These right, global companies, very, very branded houses, H&M, Gap, right, Fuel, etc. These companies get their products manufactured in a country such as Bangladesh, and the wages they provide is right, very, very small amount of wages. But please understand, because Bangladesh is a poor country, comparatively very poor country, job opportunities are very less. Job opportunities are there are very, very less. And any opportunity, they'll simply jump and cling on to this kind of an opportunity. That is the reason. That is the reason these kind of right, countries are actually targeted by developed countries or bigger companies like this. Right? They are accused of using child labor in Bangladesh. They are accused of using right, or providing very, very unfair treatment to the workers in Bangladesh. In fact, I can give you one more example that was also there in the newspaper. Right? All of you have eaten chocolates. Chocolate is basically made using cocoa. Chocolates is basically made using cocoa. Cocoa is majorly produced in African countries. That cocoa is produced majorly in African countries. And if you see the situation of the workers, how much income they are earning, what is their living conditions of the farmers, of the people who are involved in cocoa cultivation, it is very, very pathetic. They are paid very, very less wages. Throw away money is paid. Throw away means change. Whereas the companies which will source these cocoa from them, cocoa seeds from them, they will create huge amount of profits. So is it not right, abuse of the workers? Is it not exploitation of the workers when you give very less wages, when you employ child labor, when you do not even provide right working conditions, that is basically exploitation of workers. Concentration of wealth, increasing inequality, right? Rich companies will take away all the profits, workers will get small amount of wages. Income inequality will increase, wealth inequality will increase. Loss of jobs in the home countries, and what about impact on the environment? You're burning lot of these fuels, etc. Will it not cause a lot of pollution? Of course, yes. So these are some of the issues or concerns associated with the concept of globalization. Okay. Now next, idea of MSME sector. Next one is concept of MSME, micro, small, medium enterprises. Now, what is this MSME? Yesterday, I've given you a definition. MSME, right, are three classes of enterprises: micro, small, and medium enterprises. Where, whenever you want to classify any enterprise as a micro, the minimum amount, the maximum investment that is allowed is up to 1 crore rupees, and the revenue that it has generated is up to 5 crore rupees. 1 is to 5. I told you to by heart a ratio. 1 is to 5. For micro, it is 1 crore, 5 crore. For small, it is 10 crore, 50 crore. And for medium, it is 50 crore and 250 crore rupees. And this is basically micro, small, medium enterprises definition as accepted by the government. Now, why MSME sector is so important? Why is MSME sector so important for India? Point number one, whenever the employment generation takes place, lot of these jobs have been created by MSME sector. In fact, as per economic survey, the MSME sector accounts for more than 11 crore jobs in India. The MSME sector has accounts for more than 11 crore jobs. There are more than 6 crore MSME units and more than 11 crore jobs have been generated by MSME sector. Second, MSME is present in manufacturing sector as well as services sector. So in terms of production, in terms of contribution to GDP, in terms of exports also, these are very, very important. Please have a look at it. MSMEs contribute 29% of GDP numbers. MSME accounts for 40% of total exports. It accounts for 45% of manufacturing output in India. And after agriculture sector, Government of India data says, after agriculture sector, it is the MSME which is the largest generator of employment in India. Right, so these are some of the reasons why MSME sector is so important for Indian economy. And to promote the growth in the MSME sector, Government of India back in the year 2006 introduced an act very famously known as Micro, Small, Medium Enterprises Act. And not only this, it has also set up a ministry to promote MSME sector. Right, a ministry also has been set up in 2007 to promote MSME sector. Okay, now let me take up this slide. After this slide, we can stop and take up the questions from agriculture sector. What are the issues related to MSME sector? What are the problems which are hurting MSME sector? Point number one, all of you will agree if I say COVID affected MSME sector. COVID affected multiple sectors, including MSME, by the way. Because I'm talking about MSME, I'll talk only about MSME now. COVID disrupted the whole Indian economy, had a huge impact on the MSME sector. That is point number one. Point number two, lot of these MSMEs, right, are not registered. Lot of these MSME units are not registered. For example, many of you ask me, sir, can you give example of MSME that I can understand? The best example I can give you is, all of you seen provisional stores in your locality? Correct? All of you seen provisional stores in your locality? It is an example of MSME. All of you seen the shops where punctures, right, tire repairs is done? That is an MSME. So lot of these enterprises that you see on day-to-day basis, are MSME only, micro, small, medium enterprises. So more than 99% are micro enterprises, and most of them, or a large number of them, are not registered. And because they are not registered and they do not have sufficient capacity of repayment, they do not have collaterals, etc., they'll find it very difficult to get loans. They'll find it very difficult to get access to institutional loans. Institutional loans. That is the reason. Let me know how many of you have observed the advertisements which are given by NBFCs where they are going to pitch loan products. Let me see. How many of you seen these advertisements which are given by small finance banks, right? NBFCs, where they are pitching loan products. Tell me, do you not see very often a tire puncture guy being pitched with a loan product? Correct? A person who has a very small enterprise, micro enterprise, they'll simply say, don't worry, we will give you loan very easily. A shopkeeper who is finding it very difficult to get loans, NBFC says, don't worry, I will give you loan very easily. If you have not observed it, at least start observing now. At least start observing now, you will realize it. Right? Why? They know that. They very well know that MSME sector finds it very, very difficult to get institutional loans. Delayed payments. Payments a lot of times are delayed to the MSME sector. And please understand, delayed payment is a problem for any company. I'll repeat the statement. Delayed payment is problem for any company, whether it is big, small, micro, doesn't matter. But you tell me, if Tata company is supposed to get payment, there is a delay. A micro enterprise is supposed to receive a payment, there is a delay. Which of the two enterprises will feel the burden of it? I hope you understand the example here. I hope you understand the importance of the example. Right? Tata company is supposed to receive a payment. There's a delay by 15 days. There's a delay of 30 days. And there's a very, very small, right? Let's say micro enterprise, very small micro enterprise. They're also supposed to receive a small amount, but there is a delay by 15 days. Don't you think micro enterprise will be burdened by this delay? They will feel problem because of this delay. They will face issues because of this delay. So that is a point I'm trying to make. Their reliance, because they have very small amount of investment, their revenue is very, very less. Now, if the person who has purchased raw material delays payment by 15 days, or 30 days, or 60 days because of pandemic, because of a slowdown, because of a recession, the impact on the MSME sector will be very, very huge. Right? The burden on the MSME sector will be very, very huge. Okay. Supporting infrastructure such as road infrastructure, port infrastructure, etc., there is a lack in India. We do not have sufficient infrastructure in India. We'll discuss that. Don't worry. When I take up road infrastructure, you'll understand what is the problem. When I take up port infrastructure, when I take up waterways infrastructure, you will understand what is the problem in India. And finally, the MSME sector. The MSME sector is also leading to creation of lot of NPAs. And because it is vulnerable, I repeat, MSME sector is very much highly vulnerable to events that are taking place in India as well as outside India. Bigger companies can absorb the shocks much more easily compared to MSME. MSME is very much vulnerable, right? Because of various events that are taking place inside India, outside India, etc. Lot of these MSMEs have led to creation of non-performing assets. Right, so these are some of the issues or problems associated with the MSME sector. Tomorrow, we will start from reforms. Tomorrow, we'll start from this slide. That is the kind of reforms that have been implemented by the government to promote MSME sector. Okay. Now, let me take up questions. Let's solve the questions from agriculture sector. Yesterday, we did not discuss the questions in agriculture sector. Let's start. Start solving now. Okay, 47% have written it correctly, 29% have chosen option B. My dear, the term is approved. What do you mean by approved? Can I say approved means decided? All of you okay? Anybody has a problem with this? Approval means decided. Who will decide what is MSP in India? Or FRP for that matter, right? FRP or MSP? Please do let me know. Who will decide what will be the MSP in India? It will be Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs. Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs, CCEA, decides what is MSP. CACP will recommend what is MSP, the MSP or FRP. CACP will not approve it. CACP will not decide, right? It is a CCA, Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs. Okay. Right option. Right option is option A. If the question is not approved, if the question is recommended, let me know. If the question is not approved, in fact, it was the FRP is recommended by dash, then it will become option B. Then it will become option B. Okay. Okay, interesting question, but factual, nothing conceptual here. The economic cost of food grains to the Food Corporation of India is the minimum support price and bonus, if at all anything is paid, to the farmers plus. Do you remember the formula for economic cost of food grains that we have discussed yesterday? Let me see. Do you remember the concept of economic cost of food grains that we have discussed yesterday? Right? That was the first point we discussed yesterday only. I've written all of this, right? I've written it, right? Some of the points it is already there. I've written, right? Some of it. That is, I said, imagine a farmer is here and a consumer is here. And between farmer and consumer, multiple actions are done by the government. Procurement is done, storage is done, distribution is done, transportation is done, etc. etc. What was the formula? If you remember, what was the formula? Can I say MSP plus procurement incidentals plus distribution cost? Let me know. Please do participate and do let me know. Right? Procurement cost, that is MSP plus, right? If there is a bonus plus procurement incidental. What do you mean by procurement incidental? You will spend money for labor, right, to move the bags of food grains. You will have to pay mandi charges. You will have to pay money for purchasing, right? Let's say jute bags, bagging, plus, right, labor charges, plus mandi charges, procurement incidentals. And once that is done, transportation cost, right? Let's say warehousing cost, storage cost, plus, right, the money that we will give for the distributor, etc. All of that will come under the distribution cost. So procurement incidentals and distribution cost, right? So right option is option C, procurement incidentals and distribution cost. Next one. Okay, 61% have answered correctly. Why this should have been higher? Consider the following statements regarding minimum support price of Indian government. The government of India started announcing MSP in 66-67 for wheat, which was expanded to cover many more crops in the coming years in the wake of Green Revolution. This is a straightforward factual statement. I've explained this also, right? If you ask me, sir, when did you explain? Don't lie. Please go back and watch the video of Monday. Today is Wednesday. Please watch the video of Monday. You will see I've discussed MSP policy of government. I told you during Green Revolution, initially we promoted wheat, right? Then we started covering many more other crops, and today we have more than 20 crops. That first statement is correct. It is a price at which the government will purchase farmers' crops irrespective of market price of the crop. This also I've mentioned. Yes, irrespective whether the market price is lower or higher, doesn't matter. Government will pay MSP and procure food grains. Right option will be option C, both 1 and 2. Okay, 54% have answered correctly. In case of all cereals, pulses and oil seeds, procurement of MSP is unlimited. Underline the term unlimited in any state or UT of India. Do you think procurement for all cereals, for pulses, oil seeds is unlimited? Do you think that is correct? No, in fact, if you remember Shanta Core Committee, what was the recommendation? You're not prioritizing pulse procurement. You're not prioritizing oilseed procurement. Procure that. And if you remember, I told you, according to the requirement of the government, they will procure from some of the states. Some of the states procurement will be very high. Some of the states procurement will be very less. So first statement is wrong. It is not unlimited. Second, in which case, in the case of cereals and pulses, the MSP fixed in any state or UT at a level to which the market price will never rise. Absolutely no. Many of the times you can check even today, some of the crops, MSP will be greater compared to market price. And vice versa also happens. Why? Please understand, can I say market price is dependent on supply and demand? Right now, what is the supply, what is the demand? Market price will be determined by that, not by only MSP. So second statement is also wrong. Right option will be option D, neither one nor two. Okay, descriptive questions now. Elaborate the policy taken by the government of India to meet challenges of food processing sector. Straightforward. Define what is food processing. Define what is food processing. Give a one-line definition. Then go to, right, let's say challenges in the food processing sector. For example, do you remember the challenges? Demand is concentrated in urban India. We need more and more investment in more product development. Lot of these, right, are micro enterprises, right? And we also discussed infrastructure issues which are plaguing the food processing, etc. So we have discussed, right? We have discussed what are the challenges, associated with food processing. In addition to those, I've also mentioned some more. Please have a look at it. Fragmented farming means lands are broken down. Land is broken down into multiple parts and given to different, let's say, siblings. Fragmented ownership will also reduce productivity in agriculture sector. Okay. So what are the steps undertaken by the government in order to promote food processing industry? Food processing industry in this context. Mega food parks, correct? Mega food parks. Production linked incentive. One district to one product, right? Earlier we have discussed this. One district to one product, right? Etc. Right? So many initiatives have been undertaken by the government to promote food processing industries. Okay, so this is basically the approach for the question where it's a straightforward question, nothing difficult here. Straightforward question. It is asking what are the challenges and what are the reforms, right? So be very careful. These kind of questions are the easiest in UPSC. Do not make a mistake. What do you mean by MSP? How will MSP rescue the farmers from the low income trap? What do you mean by low income trap? Imagine I'm a very poor farmer. Imagine I'm a very poor farmer. My investment in agriculture sector will be very less. If my investment is very less, my income will be lesser. If my income is lesser, will I again remain poor and will I invest again lesser amount in agriculture sector? All of you okay with this argument? What do you mean by low income trap? I'm a poor farmer. I will invest very less amount. Production will be lesser. My income will be lesser. Again, my investment will be lesser. It's a cycle. It's a trap. Low income trap. So what is MSP? Start with the definition of MSP. Minimum support price is a policy wherein government will procure food grains by paying certain price, and that price is minimum support price. Come to the main body. Come to the main body. Don't write the history of MSP. Why? That is not the question. Right? Come to the main body. How will MSP rescue the farmers from low income trap? Can I simply say MSP, a farmer will be able to earn this much amount of income irrespective of whatever is the market price of the crop when they will sell it to government. And the farmer will be able to earn a fixed amount of income, guaranteed income, when they will sell this crop to the government, and instead of selling in the market at various market prices. So assured remunerative prices, it is providing an insurance against the price risk in the market. That is, the market prices are volatile. Government is going to give you, let's say, 10 rupee. So it is like an insurance against the market price variation. Okay, it will incentivize agriculture production for a particular crop. If government wants you to cultivate more of rice, they will announce higher MSP for rice. If government wants you to cultivate more of, let's say, wheat, they will announce a higher MSP for wheat. It can be used by the government to promote production of a particular crop. So these are some of the reasons why we say MSP will help farmers. MSP will help farmers to come out of low income trap. Okay, next. What are the reformative steps taken by the government to make food grain distribution system much more effective? How do you approach this kind of a question? Start with a definition. What's a definition? Under public distribution system, government has set up various shops, fair price shops, using which beneficiaries will be given food grains. That's it. That is public distribution system. But now question is not on public distribution system. What steps have been taken by the government to promote efficient distribution system? You can discuss one nation, one ration card. You can discuss direct benefit transfer. You can discuss food grain ATMs. You can discuss a promotion of agriculture production so that procurement will be improved for the government, etc. Right? You can also mention National Food Security Act. So these are certain important reformative steps which have been undertaken by the government. If you want, even you can mention Shanta Kumar Committee recommendation of providing cash subsidy, which is being tried by the government. Right? But having said so, you can also give recommendation. More reforms are required. More reforms are required. Right? For example, can we try out e-rupee system, digital voucher system, to ensure instead of cash subsidy, money, that is subsidy money, will be used only for purchasing food grains, etc. So these kind of recommendations you can provide in the mains examination. Done? Okay. Right. So these are the points I wanted to discuss today. Tomorrow we'll start with the reforms in the MSME sector. Now, before I wind up, before I close the discussion, if there are any questions, please do let me know. If there are any doubts or any questions regarding what we have discussed, please do let me know. If government will put agriculture in non-strategic sector, won't it affect the farmers? My dear, the government, by putting it under the non-strategic, understand the classification. What is the meaning of classification? The government says in strategic sector, my ownership in companies, how many companies will I own? Maximum 4. In non-strategic sector, I will not own any company. That is the argument of government of India, which means government says private sector is efficient enough. Farmers are part of private, non-government now. So farmers are there, private sector entities are there, they can participate and take care of their activities. Okay. Please redefine red tapeism. Red tapeism simply means government procedures or guidelines which will make it difficult, right, for getting access to services. Is there any logic behind owning maximum 4 companies? Again, the government says I can have 1, I can have 2, I can have 3, I can have 4. 1 to 4, not just 4. 1 to 4, right? The reason being, right, 4 is not too very high, not very low also. Government can have certain minimum presence in the sector. Okay. From where should we read all the things you have discussed in the last 2 lectures? My dear, I've given you references. I've given you references. At the end of every chapter, I've given you references. And as far as I'm concerned, I've tried to limit my references to NCERT as well as the Tamil Nadu board books. Right? You can use any of these references. Most of what I'm discussing, not all of it, because some of the current affairs is not mentioned. Right? And you cannot expect the textbooks to mention everything. For example, if you're trying to read e-rupee, you will not get it in any book. You will not get it in any book because it's a current affairs topic. Right? DBT, some of the government documents you can refer to, etc. So I've given you references, right? You can use any of these references and revise it. Okay, done. So today we'll stop the discussion here itself. Tomorrow we'll start with the slide where we are discussing reforms to promote MSME sector. We'll start from that particular slide. We'll continue. We'll finish this, and the next chapter we'll take up is most probably tomorrow we'll start investment and infrastructure. We'll take up investment as well as infrastructure chapter. Okay. So take care. Have a great day. See you tomorrow sharp at 6 a.m.